morning, everybody. Welcome to City Hall, welcome to Council Chambers, and welcome to a meeting of the Los Angeles City Council for today, Wednesday, February 11th, 2004. The City Council meets every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. Meetings are open to the public, and we do invite you to join us. For members of the public unable to attend council meetings, we can be viewed live on your cable station, Channel 35. We can also be viewed live via webcast from the city's homepage or heard via council phone. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Cardenas, Garcetti, Gruel, Han, Labange, Ludlow, Miskowski, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Smith, Villaraigosa, Weisstein, Padilla, 10 members present and a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. The council is officially in session. Before beginning with the matters appearing on today's agenda, we do have two brief presentations scheduled for today. Let me call upon Councilmember. Mr. Labange isn't ready? Let's go through some consent items. First order of business, please.
Approval of the minutes.
Mr. Labange moves. Mr. Smith seconds.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Mr. Cardenas moves. Ms. Miskowski seconds.
Mr. President, this is the time for comments from the public on items not on council's agenda.
And I do not have requests from members of the public to address the council under general public comment. General public comment for today's meeting is closed. Next item, please.
Item 59, there was a request from the city attorney to continue that matter for 1 week, which would be February 18th.
Members request to continue item 59 without objection, so ordered. Next item.
Items for which public hearings have been held, items 1 through 24. Committee report has been submitted on item number 24, and 1 and 2 are commissioners. Do you wish to hold those two on the desk?
Let's hold the commission confirmations on the desk temporarily. Colleagues, leaving items 3 through 24 before us. Public hearings have been held on these items. We do have committee reports recommending action. A motion from the floor would be required to reopen the public hearings. And seeing no such motion, do we have any requests for specials? 3 through 24, any specials? Seeing none. 24, call special by Mr. Labange. Any other specials? 3 through 23. Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Please close the roll and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Those are approved. Items 3 through 8 are ordinances and do carry over for a second reading. Next items, please.
Items for which public hearings have not been held, items 25 through 56. 10 votes are required for consideration.
25 through 56 now before us. Without objection, the council shall consider these matters today. Let me also recognize I have not received any requests from members of the public to address the council on these items. Public hearings are opened. Public hearings are closed. Any requests for specials on items 25 through 56?
And item 25 is a confirmation of city official and establishment of salary.
We'll call that special. 52 called special by Mr. Zine. Any other specials? Items 26 through 56? Yes, Mr. Labange. 25 has been called special. Other specials? Request from Councilmember Perry's office to continue item 51 for 2 weeks. That would be February 25th. Without objection, so ordered. And if there's no further requests for specials or continuances, Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Please close the roll and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Those are approved. Items 26 through 34 are ordinances and do carry over for a second reading. Next items, please.
Going back to the items called special, item 1 is a confirmation to the Human Relations Commission, Dr. Jackson, and a committee report recommends approval.
Okay, as Mr. Jackson comes forward, members, items 57 through 63 on today's agenda are closed session matters. We'll hold those on the desk as well. Welcome, Ms. Jackson.
Thank you. Good morning.
Members, item 1 now before us. Public hearing has been held. We have a committee report recommending approval. Mr. Garcetti.
I believe there's one ordinance, item 8, and we didn't have 12 members. We now do. So when we have next break, can we
Okay,
consider
let's
that?
come back to that. Item number 1 is currently before us. Members wishing to be heard on the appointment of Dr. Jackson. Mr. Ludlow.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just wanted to say good morning and welcome to one of Los Angeles' big champions. It's a real honor to have Dr. Jackson here today, and wanted to throw up a little lob ball. I know other members are going to want to say a few things here or there, but wanted to get your thoughts on the future of the Human Relations Commission and your passion for human rights, civil rights, and what has inspired you to be on this commission.
All right, thank you. First of all, I'd like to say that Los Angeles is the most awesome city in the United States and arguably in the world, and largely because of its diversity. I have to say that this morning I was thinking about how this city council is the type of city council that I've been waiting to see for 18 years, the 18 years that I've lived in Los Angeles, because it's so representative of our diverse population and the diverse cultures here in Los Angeles. I believe that Los Angeles has good reason to be very, very hopeful. Not just because we have this kind of city council that this city has needed since its founding, but also because we finally have a population that has a heightened sensitivity and awareness to the cultural greatness of Los Angeles. And I look forward to helping to promote the greatness of the diversity of Los Angeles.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. I just want to say, colleagues, it's a great deal of pleasure that I rise in support of this appointment. I've had the opportunity to spend time with Dr. Jackson in a number of community events, and she's passionate about what she does. She has been very engaged in community organizing. Councilmember Hahn would be pleased to know she's very active in neighborhood council organizing, and has just really been a stalwart on the issue of trying to bring communities together. Spent a lot of time teaching the theories of nonviolence. I've heard her talk on the issues of ethnic, trying to bridge the ethnic divisions in various communities. And it's just very, very heartwarming to see this nomination has been brought to the table, and look forward to your work on the Human Relations Commission. We have great Human Relations Commissioners, great Human Relations Commission staff, but there are daunting challenges in front of this city. A report that just came out showed that attacks on people based on their sexual orientation is on the rise like none other. And right now, many people in the gay and lesbian community are looking to the city for leadership and direction. And we've also seen the issue of youth-based violence arise in attacks against young African-American men, which is something that we're looking to for leadership from this Human Relations Commission as well. So we've got a great advocate coming on. I'm full support of your nomination. Colleagues, I would urge an aye vote, and thank you so much for volunteering to serve the city of Los Angeles.
Thank you, Councilman Ludlow, and I'd also like to thank the Mayor, James Hahn, for this appointment.
Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm glad Mr. Ludlow is consulting his kitchen cabinet all around him, and I'm sure they approve as well of the appointment. Want to congratulate you as well on becoming doctor as well.
Thank you.
Was nice news that you shared with me. Two quick questions. One, and they're not easy to answer. One, what can we be doing? I know the Human Relations Commission has begun some work in this area to do better outreach to our immigrant community here in Los Angeles, and that kind of divide. I think there's less of, in some ways, a divide between racial groups, though that still exists and is still profound, than among those who are immigrant and non-immigrant in our city. If you look at the difference between Africans and African Americans, second-generation Latinos and new immigrants from Central America, you know, that gulf continues to be one. And what sort of ideas do you have for that? My second question is, what too can we do in terms of in areas where we have African American population and Latino population coexisting, where sometimes, you know, the community groups and the networks kind of existed in parallel instead of in unison. What sort of ideas would you have for bringing those two communities together?
Okay, I have one answer to both questions, and that answer is has 2 points. Number one is we need to increase dialogue about those issues in our population, and we need to increase dialogue about those issues at the decision-making level. But more importantly, we need to really get serious about educating the community about the value of immigrant and refugee populations to our society. It's no secret that every day at lunchtime, we're benefiting from the work of immigrant and refugee populations. Every day at lunch, dinner, and breakfast, we're benefiting from the hard work that they do, the dedication that they have made to not just making a living in America, but contributing positive things to America, even to our tax base. And so I think that too often the general population overlooks the importance of the importance and the value of immigrant populations, the hard work they do, the beautiful aspects of the different cultures that they bring to America. These are the things that make America, and certainly the things that make Los Angeles. And I also believe that Los Angeles, like no other American city, has a responsibility to heighten the awareness of these issues to the rest of the nation. I believe that whatever happens in Los Angeles, culturally, ethnically, policy-wise, is going to take root across the country. And we're already seeing in cities like Atlanta and Memphis, where they may not be as well equipped to absorb the diverse cultures and ethnicities, and even the different lifestyles. And Los Angeles can do a lot to help those cities develop in those areas. And I'd like to be a person who, at least on the commission, promotes that kind of work. Thank you, Councilman.
Mr. Zine.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning.
Good morning.
In response to Councilman Garcetti's question, Dr. V, and if you say what the V is, because we heard this in committee, that may respond to some of his concerns on that.
Yes, and thank you for that question, Councilman. My first name is Valencia, and the reason my first name is Valencia is that when I was born in 1962, we were living in Watts, and that community even then was a multi-ethnic community. Our next door neighbors were Latino, and they and my mother created a familial relationship to the extent that my mother had decided that as soon as I was born, we would be moving to San Diego, and she wanted to take a part of them with us. And so she gave me as a first name their surname, Valencia. I'm so proud to have a dual heritage then, and to have that name, and it's carried me all the way through my life. And for that reason, as I said in the committee meeting, I believe I was born to do this work, and I'm happy to be able to stand, as a member of leadership in Los Angeles to carry out exactly what I was purposed to do.
I was going to ask that question, but when Councilman Garcetti brought that up, I thought that was a perfect segue into that. I know we heard in committee your qualifications, your desire for this position. I know that the rabbi was there. I don't know if he's here this morning, but normally he makes sure he chaperones people through the system. And I know you'll be a welcome addition to the commission, and your desire to make things better, to improve for all people of Los Angeles. So you've got my full support, and I'm sure my colleague Janice Hahn is going to have a few comments also. So congratulations to you.
Thank you, Councilman Zine.
Mr. Labange.
Thank you, and thank you very much, Dr. Jackson, for your desire and your agreement to serve on the Human Relations Commission, which is so important, because we sometimes move down the lanes of the roads of our lives, but to take time to build good human relations is so important for all of us. Because just if you look at that freeway out there today, there's a different amount of people for all the different amount of cars in there, and models and makes and sizes. I just wanted to put a plug in for two things. One, first, is our great history in this city, to never forget our history, whether good or bad. But our history is a great history of people who've come here. The original 44 Los Pobladores, who came from Mission San Gabriel, 9 miles to the banks of the river, of which 26, I believe, 26 of that 44 were of African American descent, and the diversity when it started in this city. And then as you go on now, the most amazing statistic, there's almost 4 million people in the city. Of 1.5 million of those people are born outside of the United States, which is a tremendous resource. and a tremendous challenge. I believe it's 41% of the people who live in the city of Los Angeles are born outside of the United States, so that welcoming concept and idea we must continue to promote. And finally, I just wanted to say I'm president of Sister Cities of Los Angeles. We have 20 sister cities, and all have committees that are run by citizens outside of City Hall, who all bring their deep love and devotion of their diversity, of their heritage to us. And I think sometime appropriate would be great to get our sister cities together with our Human Relations Commission to either further the discussion of the importance of good human relations. Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
Thank you, Councilman Labange.
Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I certainly rise in support of Dr. Jackson to serve on the Human Relations Commission. I was very impressed in our committee when we looked at your incredible resume and heard you speak about many of the things that you said today. And I was particularly impressed with, and I think it's what is so key in the city today in 2004, and that is how do we build coalitions, how do we build consensus among all the various diverse groups that make up our wonderful city. And I was very impressed with your answer on that. I'm also very impressed with your involvement with neighborhood councils and the fact that you've looked at them and you've watched them. I think they are a microcosm, really, of human relations in the city of Los Angeles. Many are having extreme growing pains, but I think it's really all about their relationships with each other and their neighborhoods. So I'm one of those that believes it's really all about human relations in this city. That's true. And I love it that you think that you were born for this service. And we really appreciate, it's not easy to be a commissioner these days in the city of Los Angeles. So the fact that you have agreed to say, yes, I will serve in this very unique level of public service, I really am so supportive of you, and I think you will do a wonderful job in working to bring the city together.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hahn.
Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I, too, want to rise in support of your appointment today and how important it is the Human Relations Commission is in the city of Los Angeles. You've heard from so many of our colleagues about the challenges we face, and Ms. Hahn mentioned also our neighborhood councils. I'd like to see a role being played by the Human Relations Commission in some of the areas where we've had difficulty in communicating, where there have been cultural differences, where a little bit of help and a little bit of advice and counsel from someone like you or members of the Human Relations Commission and staff would be very much appreciated. I was a member of Mayor Bradley's staff for many years, and when the Human Relations Commission was established, and understand its importance in this city. And so I am pleased that you're willing to commit your time and energy to this cause and to use all of your varied experiences to make that commission the best commission it can be. So congratulations, and I stand in support as well.
Thank you, Councilwoman. It's an honor, truly.
Thank you, Ms. Gruhl. Other members wishing to be heard? If not, Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Please close the roll and tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Congratulations, and thank you for your service to the city. Let's send item number 1 forthwith, please, and proceed to the next item.
Item number 2 is confirmation of Mr. Ernesto Cardenas to the City Planning Commission.
Okay, members, item number 2 now before us. Once again, we have a committee report recommending approval. Are there members wishing to be heard on item number 2? Members wishing to be heard on item number 2? Brothers wishing to be heard on item number 2? Mr. Cardenas.
Yes, thank you very much. I'd like to ask the nominee a few questions regarding your background. Have you had any experience in planning or commission planning or anything like that?
Yes, I was previously on the North Valley Area Planning Commission.
Okay, and your technical background, what kind of, what did you went to college, I presume?
Yes.
And what degree did you receive? What kind of work do you do?
I'm a senior project manager with corporate real estate with SBC Services, and my degree is mechanical engineering from UC Santa Barbara and a master's from Cal Poly Pomona.
So have you ever, on your day-to-day work, ever dealt with having to analyze plans or anything of that nature, looking at lot plans or things that have to do relative to planning or real estate issues?
Every day.
And how long have you been doing that?
I've been with SBC for 18 years.
Okay. Point of personal privilege, I think it's only appropriate that I ask you one final question. Who's your favorite brother?
I'd have to say my youngest brother.
Okay. All right. Which was a better answer that he gave in planning, because he
Under
said,
penalty of perjury, answer the question.
he said, my favorite brother at this moment is you. So you've improved. I look forward to your service. You have, in fact, been a commissioner in the past, and you live in the Valley. You were born in the Valley. I'm glad to see that we're increasing the number of commissioners in the San Fernando Valley. I think it's very important that we have a diverse commission, and at the same time, I'm very proud to say that you don't have to look very far in the communities to find people with the kind of background and the kind of talent that, as we just saw at the table just a few minutes ago, of people who are willing to serve, to give up their time and of their expertise to serve the city of Los Angeles in this volunteer capacity. And I'm very proud to say that we have more people like you throughout this city, and I hope that we all get together and make sure we put good names forward so that we have a very diverse commission when it comes to geographically, and certainly a very diverse commission structure here in the city of Los Angeles when it comes to ethnic backgrounds, age, every kind of aspect, because I think that the more well-rounded we are, the better off we are as a city, because we get a much better collective of perspectives that in some cases are very unique and in some cases can add something to the table that perhaps in decades past we've never really had in the city of Los Angeles because of that lack of diversity. So congratulations, and I hope everything goes well today.
Thank you.
Mr. Weiss, followed by Mr. Zine.
Thank you, I'm in the 11th District. Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Mr. Cardenas. Had a wonderful discussion with you in committee, and just want to tell you how much I look forward to your service. It's clear to me that you have, we talked about this in committee a little bit, and I'll just talk about it again in full council just for what it's worth, because there are more people here. But I really believe you're the first member of an AP, or the second member of an APC? Mm-hmm. All right. Well, it's a good trend. It's a really good trend to see people who've actually been in the trenches making these sort of difficult planning decisions elevated. I mean, in law, that's typically how it happens. You start out on what used to be the municipal court, and you work your way through the system, and you get elevated. In a sense, you're being elevated, and I think it's a really good thing, not just for you, but it's a good general trend to see, because it means we're going to get more community representation, and we're going to get more experienced representation. So I look forward to your many years of service, and good luck to you, Mr. Cardenas.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Zine.
Thank you, Mr. President. Did your brother always pick on you?
No.
I was wondering why. I wonder
He was
why
the youngest.
I wonder why he was picking on you. It doesn't matter. But, I have a younger brother who was picking on me. He was picking on you this morning when he was asking those pointed questions. Stay out of it. You can go to Marshall High. I met you a couple days ago.
Yes, sir.
And I didn't know your experience, but I know your desire to serve the city, and I know your brother's wonderful career with government service. You obviously have the qualifications. Some people may say, well, why are you being selected to this? Well, you've proven well your tenure with your employer, with your education, with your experience, with your ability to make those decisions. And it's critical that we have people who have that right background to fill those positions. And while we met briefly and had a short conversation, I promised I wouldn't pick on you. And I was sad to see your brother picking on you, but that's the family heritage sometimes. So I wish you well in that endeavor. It's a very important position because it really sets the tone and the path where we're going in Los Angeles as far as communities and enhancement of communities and the business environment. So congratulations to you, and I'm sure you'll do well in that. 18 years with your present employer.
Correct.
That's a good record, a very positive record. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Other members wishing to be heard on this item? Seeing none, let's proceed with the vote. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Please close the roll and tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Forthwith, please, on item number 2. And before proceeding to the next item, we do have 2 quick presentations scheduled for today. Mr. Labange says he's ready. Mr. Labange.
Come on, Ms. Hoffman. Everybody. I'd like to call on our great librarian, Susan Kent, to join us. Ms. Hoffman, if you would, from the Library Foundation. And I've dropped the top of the microphone, so I apologize. Mr. Garcetti is joining me. Want to feel good about something? There's a man behind me who thought so good about public libraries that he donated from his family foundation over $250,000 to the new Will and Ariel Durant Library on Sunset Boulevard so the community could have a full-service room. And I think that deserves a better hand. I don't know how many of you have library cards in this room. The police department may check you for ID, but I'm going to check you for library cards if I don't hear a better clap for that. Mort, I want to thank you for stepping up. He also owns one of the greatest, good job there, Mr. Ludlow, right there, you got it. He owns one of the greatest historic monuments in the city of Los Angeles. It's a private building. It's the one that we all see when we pass Sunset Boulevard in Mr. Garcetti's district, the crossroads of the world. But Mort, I wanted to thank you for your contribution. Before I ask you to speak and ask Susan to speak, I want to ask the great councilman of the 13th district to say a few words because he knows how important community engagement and involvement is. Eric Garcetti.
Thank you very much, Mr. Labange, and thank you for honoring not just a great man, but a great family here in Los Angeles with the Lacretz family. And I want to thank Morton and his entire family for their generosity. We have an amazing library system here, so your investment is probably as good as it can be anywhere. We've got the Librarian of the Year in the country here. We've got a commitment through our library bonds to making sure that these islands of learning are in every part of this city. But what a wonderful library that was just opened in Mr. Labange's district, and it couldn't have been made possible without your generosity. Thank you, too, for all that you do at Crossroads of the World, which was, trivia-wise, colleagues, the first mall in America. Now it looks tiny compared to the mega malls that we have, but it was the first kind of outdoor mall. Great historical property with some amazing tenants that are there. But I just too wanted to add the bandwagon and thank you very much for really stepping up to the plate. And I know that so many young people and their families will be able to, for generations, be able to expand their horizons because of what you have done. So congratulations.
Mr. Garcetti, I know you have some new nightclubs in Hollywood, and you have sometimes those inspectors come out to make sure everything's fire safe. You got to inspect the public libraries because they're packed with people too.
That's right, absolutely.
And make sure. Susan Kent, our librarian, for some remarks.
I just want to thank Morton Lacretz. It's not often that an individual calls and says, what can I do to help? And Morton called the Library Foundation. Evelyn Hoffman came to see me and offered to make an incredibly generous donation to the Durant Library. And he's the ideal donor. He's not demanding, writes the check, and is very easy to work with. So we thank you, Morton, and Linda, his daughter, for all your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan, thank you. Evelyn Hoffman from our great Library Foundation.
As Executive Director of the Library Foundation, this has been one of the most rewarding times of my 12-year career there. But it also demonstrates that although Mr. Lacretz has been incredibly generous, there are literally thousands of people out there that care about their public libraries, and we are so grateful for their support, but most particularly this morning for the Lacretz family support.
Evelyn, thank you. And finally, from the library side, our President of the Board of Library Commissioners, Lucy McCoy.
Thank you, Tom. I want to thank, obviously, our donor here today, who is really, we find in our library system, as all of you know, the difference between our great library and really a library that's able to serve the needs of this entire community. The difference is made through our foundation. So we do want to thank the Library Foundation as well, who has been there every step of the way with us in making this a great library system it is. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank the members of the City Council and the Mayor who continue to support us even through these very difficult budget times. Thank you.
All right, now before we call on Morton Lacretz, I asked Mr. Deaton to answer this question. Raise your hand. Morton Lacretz went to what high school in Los Angeles? A former mayor went to that high school. Close. He went to Poly down on Washington, where Tom Bradley went to high school. A graduate of UCLA, a wonderful man who just picked up the phone, and said, I want to do something for the Los Angeles Public Library and this new Will and Ariel Durant Library. Please welcome with a big round of applause, Morton Lacretz.
What better charity can you think of than a library? Everybody has a pleasant memory of being in the library and listening to stories. So when I saw the sign, Will and Ariel Durant, I called up. I think that's great, and I'm very happy to be able to do it. And besides, they're good neighbors to Crossroads of the World. Better to have literate people that can read the signs than not. Thank you.
Oh, Mort, thank you. Mort, we have a certificate for you to salute you, and also we have a great book called Hollywood Then and Now, which someone told me is on the New York bestsellers list, Eric, because of all the work you've done in Hollywood. Okay. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
We're going to take a picture in back. Okay, we're going to go in back right now.
Thank you, Mr. Bonds. Thank you. And now for presentation, Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask Jan Perry to come up, and also Martin Ludlow and our Council President, Alex Padilla, and Janice Hahn, if she's available. We are going to honor the LA branch of the NAACP and ask Dr. Washington, the President, to come up. She's going to be joined by several members of the LA NAACP branch, Addie Abbar, Marie Baptiste, Hester Watkins, Jean Kasari, Melba Gardner, Theodora Bowen, Vassie Thomas, Mary Barrett, and then Pastor Campbell. And we're here today to acknowledge that the LA branch of the NAACP is celebrating its 90th anniversary on February the 12th of this year. It was formed in 1914 in the home of Doctors John and Vada Somerville, both of who were graduates of the University of Southern California School of Dentistry and active leaders in the affairs of the black community. The LA branch of the NAACP has a number of founding members, including, come on in here, E. Burton Cerruti, Charles Alexander, John Shackelford, Betty Hill, Reverend Joseph Johnson, W.T. Cleghorn, and Dr. Charles Edward Block, who served as president for 8 years. They immediately began to address the mounting concerns about racial discrimination in the city. They aggressively fought back, second-class treatment of the city's colored citizens in serving as the principal political leadership in the black community. A person that we've all known as Mr. Civil Rights, Dr. H. Claude Hudson, served as the president in 1924 and was a local dentist and civic leader that led the organization for 10 years and hosted the 19th annual NAACP convention in Los Angeles, the first ever held here. In 1932, they filed a successful lawsuit against the Monrovia School Board in the aftermath of an earthquake which damaged the Los Angeles public schools, forcing them to give black students the same consideration as Caucasian students who were allowed to enroll in that city until LA schools could be made safe. They aggressively fought back against discrimination on several fronts over the next 15 years, winning lawsuits against the Pasadena Department of Parks to allow black and Mexican citizens the right to swim daily in the municipal pool, against the County of Los Angeles for discrimination and a landmark decision in 1948 in which the Supreme Court of the United States ruled unconstitutional restrictive real estate covenants which precluded black residency in certain neighborhoods. And I believe that covered our Leimert Park area in the city of Los Angeles. The Los Angeles branch of the NAACP was instrumental in the Supreme Court 1976 decision to order the Los Angeles Unified School District to implement a school desegregation plan, and 5 years later, the branch again went on the offensive in a protracted battle against the state constitutional amendment that sought to undermine the Supreme Court decision by restricting transportation of students away from their home school. They have taken the lead as an advocate with the Los Angeles Unified School District for development of programs addressing the issues of integration, overcrowding, and low achievement among Black and minority students. They encourage and recognize educational achievement through the annual Salute to Educational Excellence, and they work in close concert with the local Black Leadership Coalition on Education. They've adopted a more aggressive stance in issues affecting the economic development of the Black community in the 1980s, and successful Black Dollar Day campaign underscored the importance of the Black consumer market, and they successfully lobbied for a Metro Rail subway station that would have directly impact the Black community, and supported efforts to rescind the county proposal to contract out jobs held by county workers. The Los Angeles branch of the NAACP successfully pressed for fair share agreements with the Coors Brewing Company and McDonald Restaurants under the leadership of one of their youngest presidents, John T. McDonald III, who unfortunately passed away at a very young age. They continue to support the programs and policies of the NAACP with aggressive action at the local level, in addition to ongoing initiatives in the area of civil rights and social and economic development. Local priorities revolved around the theme of education. Now, we're here to resolve by the adoption of this resolution that the Los Angeles City Council, along with the mayor, city attorney, city controller, congratulates the Los Angeles branch of the NAACP on the occasion of their 90th anniversary and extends our best wishes and continued success. Let me ask comments from our elected officials and Janice, and where are you, Mark?
Try to keep our comments brief. I think Councilmember Parks almost said it all. I'm just honored to be part of this presentation on the 90th anniversary of the LA chapter of the NAACP, an organization that, ladies and gentlemen, is still very relevant for the city and the various communities of Los Angeles. While the roots and the history and the track record of the NAACP in Los Angeles and throughout the country is one that's rooted in battles over educational equity issues and economic equity issues, so too are the battles of today and in the future. As has been said, for this country to live up to the true meaning of its creed, we look at contemporary battles, whether it's the grocery worker strike and how that's impacting communities, the future of our airport, and economic opportunities that are going to be created. What are we doing to ensure equity and justice in those investments and in infrastructure throughout the city? As it pertains to education, we look at LAUSD and schools being built and budgets being cut. What does that mean in terms of equitable treatment of students throughout the district and a fair shot at a good education for all? We look at state budget cuts and what that's meant for the UCs and Cal State and community college systems throughout the state, where, in my opinion, we're seeing the welcome mat being taken away for students from many communities of color. So the battles continue, folks. The battles continue. And we look back on history and look to the NAACP for their leadership. We look to them for the partnership they have provided to other advocacy organizations, the city, although be it begrudgingly at one point in our history, and we tip our hat to them for having gotten us to this place. The city of Los Angeles and the region is much better for the work of the NAACP. We congratulate them and tell them, keep up the fight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parks, Mr. President. And I'm standing here with Janice Hahn. And for those of you who are not sure, nobody loves African American History Month more than Janice Hahn.
That's true.
That's right. And so I'm pleased that she's standing up here with all of us today to recognize Dr. Washington and her crew of dedicated women. And these women prepare us for the broader, more global issues that are occurring not only in our country but throughout the world, and not only are a representative on behalf of the African American community, but are also fighting on behalf of all those who endure similar situations, similar issues. So their work is not just a metaphor that defines a vision for the future, but uplifts and enhances the quality of life for all of us. And I wanted to point out now, Dr. Campbell, I know you're here too, and I don't want to forget you, because we love you too. But these ladies back here, they're here, they provide continuity, stability, and the hard volunteer work that often goes unrecognized on the phones, preparing letters, stuffing envelopes, and basically doing the groundwork, the ground war, and the ground activism on behalf of all of us. So I want to say thank you so much, and happy African American History Month. And now a few words from our dear sister Janice.
Thank you, Sister Perry. And I'm very pleased to be here today as we do honor all those who have gone before us, all those who have fought the good fight, all in the history of certainly not only this country, but particularly in Los Angeles. And I stand here today, and you know, it's really up to us to continue to tell the story. It's up to us to continually talk about the history and what the NAACP did for this city and for certainly for this country. And it was not that long ago. It was not that long ago that H. Claude Hudson was arrested for swimming at Redondo Beach. It was not that long ago. And we must not forget that, and we must continue to tell the story. But I'm here to say, and I was taught to say NAACP, so that, you know, that's how I was raised to say it. But every fight, every battle, every victory does not come easily. And wouldn't we like to live in a society where everyone did the right thing? Wouldn't we love to live in a society that people just knew how to get along and how to do the right thing and how to treat people equally? But it's not that way. So organizations like NAACP were there to make sure, to fight for, and not let us forget to do the right thing every single day in how we treat other human beings. So congratulations to all of you. The battles you have won and the victories you have won really serve us well today, but we must not forget.
Take it home. I just wanted to say a couple of things. I think, first of all, thank you to Bernard Parks for making this happen today. But we actually are here with living history makers. And if I'm incorrect, I think Jan Perry is only the third African-American woman elected on the city council. I hope. Pat, is it Rita Walters and yourself? Is that it? That's it. No, it's only two. It's only two. So Jan Perry is only the second African-American woman elected in the city council. And Dr. Washington, many of you may not remember this, but throughout the country there was a real clarion call for a change on voting reform after the debacle in Florida. And it was Dr. Washington leading the effort here in Los Angeles to try to get national voter reform and election day reform. And so there's no history. This is living legend. Reverend Campbell has really led the effort. He was literally single-handedly responsible for bringing the first time ever the international president of the AFL-CIO, John Sweeney, to South Central Los Angeles. It had never happened before in the history of the labor movement, and it happened under your leadership. And then lastly, it's coincidental, but sitting in the back of the chambers today is perhaps the image of putting the law for justice, and that is the former general counsel for the NAACP, Connie Rice, is here today. I just want to acknowledge, Connie, wave your hand back there, because I know you're back there. She's working. So anyway, we've got living history in here, and Councilman Parks, thank you so much for bringing this forward today. Dr. Washington, your vigilance and your leadership is so desperately needed now more than ever. So thank you for your continued work.
Mr. Parks, also other members of the council wish to speak. Councilwoman Gruhl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pleased to as well, and nice to see you, Geraldine. And we had the pleasure of meeting when I actually worked at DreamWorks, and we were working on some projects together. And I just wanted to stand as well to congratulate you on this anniversary for your own personal commitment that you've made, but also the NAACP and the difference it's made in so many lives in civil rights. And we're just proud that there's been an active leadership here in Los Angeles. For all of you that are standing there, have made a tremendous a difference in the lives of our residents. So I wanted to join with my colleagues and congratulate you on your anniversary and your continued involvement as our local NAACP. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Congratulations, Geraldine, the entire board from the Somerville's founding in 1914 and the great work in World War I. And making sure that nurse training was provided for all Angelenos and fighting the civil rights battles that we've had here in Los Angeles that sometimes for many decades didn't make the headlines of other places around the United States. The NAACP chapter here in Los Angeles is probably one of the proudest chapters in this country, and we are not just celebrating the national organization but the specific local work here today. So I wanted to thank Councilmember Parks for doing this, thank all the council members who are celebrating. Know that this entire city that we represent today celebrates with you, not just one neighborhood, not just one group, but this entire city today calls out, and the heralds that you have been for equal rights in this city and in this country, we join you hand in hand, so congratulations today.
Thank you, Ms. Garcetti. Mr. Cardenas.
I just wanted to give my 10 seconds of a personal thank you and remind the viewers that you don't fight for extra rights, you fight for equality. And that's one of the things that I think that some people get a little frustrated, think, oh, why are these people making such a big deal? It's real simple. We just want everybody to be treated like human beings. We just want everybody to have equal rights. We want every child to have the same dreams, the same opportunities, and then let God take care of the rest. So thank you very much for all of your wonderful, wonderful work for the many, many years to come as well. Thank you.
Mr. Villaraigosa.
Let me add my name and voice to the chorus of speakers today to speak in support of this resolution and honoring this great organization. When you look at the changing demographics of the City Council, we just elected Fabian Nunez as Speaker of the California State Assembly. Make no mistake about it. It started with the Civil Rights Movement. It started with the Brown decision. It started with all of the sacrifices of the civil rights leaders who opened up the door for us. And this organization was the preeminent organization leading that struggle. And so we thank you for making America truer to itself.
Thank you. Mr. Zine.
I'll add my congratulations along with my colleagues, and just one statement: one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And that's what it's all about. Thank you all very much for being here.
No other speakers on the queue, Mr. Parks?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to, Ms. Washington, Dr. Washington, present this resolution. And for all those that are listening and on Channel 35 and they're here, and as I tell Dr. Washington whenever I speak in front of one of her groups, the one way we can all help the NAACP is become lifetime members. That's right. And I have my card that I show her each time, but it's something in which we can all continue, even though we want to honor them today, but we can continue the struggle by all becoming lifetime members. And I'd like to ask Dr. Washington this time to come up and make some comments.
Thank you very much, Councilman Parks. Before I get started, I want to add another bit of history, and it is that I am the only woman president to have been elected president of the Los Angeles NAACP, and I have served in that position now. This is the 8th year, and I guess we're about ready now to have the second woman elected to the position of president. So it's really an honor for me to be here today, and for, as you've heard, one of our life members to be instrumental in arranging for this observance, in arranging for the NAACP to come to the City Council and say to an audience that includes not only the people in this chamber, but on the radio and television waves that go out to the city. And so, President Padilla, I certainly want to thank you on behalf of the NAACP and to all of the council members. Thank you for receiving this delegation of people who represent the Los Angeles NAACP. It has not been easy during these 90 years, and I have selected a portion of James Weldon Johnson's writing. At first it was a poem, and then it was set to music. And many of you, if you attend events in the African American community, you see and you hear, and some of you even know the song and you join in. But it is lift every voice and sing. And so James Weldon Johnson said and this I believe is the second stanza, "Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with our steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of our slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last where the white gleam of our bright star is cast." And it was in an environment such as this that Doctors John and Veda Somerville called together a few citizens, and they began then to organize, and they did organize, the Los Angeles NAACP. They immediately began, as you heard in the proclamation, to work to end discrimination and prejudice for, at that time, it was mostly a black and white Los Angeles. It's quite different today. And so if we were to go back over the years, I'm sure that it would be different. I know that it would. But the NAACP has persevered and has been a strong emphasis, has been a stroke of luck and hope, and a voice for minorities, and it has also been a shield for minorities. We used to say African Americans, but now I do think that because of the changes in our population, that we could say easily for all minorities. And so although the conditions for African Americans have improved, there is still much to be done. But we want you to know that the NAACP affirms its commitment to the true American dream, which is an integrated society, rich in diversity, and open equally to all. We continue to seek a single class of citizenship for every American. We compliment you, members of the council, for your commitment to the Los Angeles that respects the dignity and individuality of all Los Angelinos as you deliberate and, yes, dictate matters, concerns, and issues that affect the humanity of our great city. We thank you, council members, for your consideration of matters that affect the whole city while giving careful consideration to your own districts. So on behalf of the Los Angeles NAACP, I am pleased to thank you again, Councilman Parks, and all members of the council for the warm welcome we received this morning. A special thank you to council members Jan Perry and Martin Ludlow for the strong and welcome support that you continue to give to the Los Angeles NAACP. You, and let me include Councilman Parks, are the manifestation of the hopes, aspirations, and dreams of thousands of faceless African Americans who dared to dream that their sons and daughters would become teachers, lawyers, governors, pilots, professional athletes, and so forth, and yes, even council members, or whatever they wanted to be. History records the role of the NAACP during these weary years. Testimonies confirm that the NAACP gave hope when the situations were bleak and seemed to beat and wear people down. So again, in the words of James Weldon Johnson, let me say, the poem says, lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicings rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun, let us, all of us, march on until victory is won. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, and God bless you for the great work you do. Mr. Garcetti, one final comment?
Just very briefly, I know I spoke, but all 14 members, besides Mr. Parks, who's already a lifetime member, and I'm sure we have other members, now have membership applications that we printed out right here so we can join up today.
Excellent. Okay, the council will take a 1-minute recess for picture-taking purposes, and we'll return to the regular agenda.
Thank you very much for that special presentation, colleagues. I'd like to call us back to order here and return to the matters appearing on our agenda. Before we take up the next item, we have more than 12 members present. And I heard Mr. Garcetti move reconsideration of all the ordinances a second ago. Ms. Gruhl seconds that motion. Madam Clerk, please open the roll on reconsideration.
Mr. President, that would be items 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 26 through 34.
Roll is open. Let's give the clerk a second here.
There we go.
Please close the roll and tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Those ordinances are now back before us. And unless there's any questions or concerns, let's take another vote on the ordinances from today's agenda. Please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Those ordinances are approved on first reading. Next item, please.
Next item, Mr. President, item number 25 is a communication from the Chair of EQ Committee and the EERC regarding confirmation and establishment of salary for Rita Robinson, Director of Bureau of Sanitation.
Okay, as Ms. Robinson comes forward, members do have a committee report recommending confirmation of Ms. Robinson. Are there members wishing to be heard on this item? I have Ms. Perry, followed by Ms. Gruhl and Mr. Labange. Ms. Perry.
Just wanted to say that Ms. Robinson came before the committee, and I forwarded this as a transmittal, since I think I was the only one there in attendance that day, but that she has a long history of service with the City of Los Angeles, coming from the CAO's office, and should bring a significant level of skill and attention to strong financial management of that particular department, and be an overall great benefit to the Department of Public Works, and for that reason I rise today. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm pleased to also stand here in support of Rita Robinson. Those of you that may not know her, Rita has been a tremendous asset for the city of Los Angeles, has been one of those people that the mayor and others have called upon to serve in roles when we've desperately needed an experienced individual who can keep a department going, keep it on the straight and narrow, and I'm so pleased that he has once again tapped her to be the head of Bureau of Sanitation, and we've enjoyed a working relationship while you were not only at DOT and then went over to housing as well. So I want to stand in support of your appointment today. How proud we are of you and what you've accomplished, and your willingness to oftentimes pitch hit and learn the ropes very quickly, and to be someone that we feel we can count on in any role that you play, and particularly in this new responsibility. Thank you so much.
Mr. Labange.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Rita, congratulations. Look forward to a unanimous vote on this. The Bureau of Sanitation does a tremendous job, 24 hours a day. I see them. Some work 312, where they do the sewer lines, and they go down with the video cameras to make sure the sewer lines work. Obviously, the hard-working men and women who collect trash in the city, mechanical collection. The biggest problem, though, that you'll have to come up to help me is come up with a solution to the bulky item problem. Prior to mechanical collection, when there were 2 people on a truck, much of everything got picked up. Now, because of limited in the mechanical collection, a lot of stuff gets stayed on the street, and then more pile comes in the broken window concept. So I hope in your administration you could come up with a defined plan to do that. Also, I'm very concerned on the rollout of the big bin containers, and I think you've been briefed on that. In the hillside areas, parts of the city, and the older parts of the city, they want to put 90-gallon containers out, which sometimes just sit on the street now, and people want to see them put on their property, put in there away from the street in that cleanup situation. Your staff has been doing a tremendous job of trying to communicate with our neighborhood councils, which is real important. I just wanted to articulate those points. Number one, though, is bulky items. If we could find a way to deal with bulky items, if we could get some kind of staffing to do that, I think it's real important, or also having the staff work a different hour, even on Saturdays when a lot of community groups do neighborhood cleanups, get them out there at some time. And finally, though, the last thing I wanted to say, and members of the 1st District, the 13th, and the 14th, and the 4th, I wanted the Bureau of Sanitation to look at a 4-day work week, a 410, and I wanted to look at North Central, which is the older established area. We have, I believe, 580 sanitation trucks that go out every day, and if we could reduce one day, if we could pull 100 plus trucks off for one day, we would do a lot for congestion and for pollution reduction, but on that effort there to look at a concept of a test program in North Central, I don't think, obviously, all people physically work hard every day, but no one works as hard as the constant movement of one who's collected sanitation or recyclables or yard waste in the truck, and they're constantly under pressure to move, and it's a very difficult job. We want to support them, but I wanted to make some points real clear. Wanted to look at that and wish you well in your appointment. And I also think, Mr. President, just wanted to say it's nice to see not only Commissioner Ruiz here, but the President of the Board of Public Works, Valerie Shaw, who was named Public Works Official of the Year in all of California to support your appointment. All of California. There's no northern or southern anymore.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. Mr. Smith, followed by Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you, Mr. President. As chairman of the Public Works Committee, Rito's first assignment was to come talk to me. And I want to say, and I want to hear from you again, that you're willing to take this division of the Public Works Department to new heights, that we have been stuck for too long in doing the same thing over and over again, and that you have made a commitment to follow what the mayor's recommendations are, to take us to new levels of recycling, which is a financial benefit to the city, to move us beyond where we are today, which is just doing it the way we've done it for a long time. And I applaud your energy. I applaud your commitment to the future rather than doing it the way we've always done it. And I know you have a strong financial background in the department. They have a strong history of serving the city of LA in many departments, many roles, and you'll bring that leadership skill with you to take over one of the biggest departments of the city with one of the largest number of employees and one of the largest budgets. And certainly one of those things under the radar screen of most citizens because they've become so used to the city of LA just picking up their trash without any concerns. They don't pay a bill. They just see it taken care of. And certainly it's one of our most vital services and one that people don't realize how important it is. But in discussing with you, I know that you've made a commitment, and I want to hear you say that one more time for the public benefit, that you're going to move this department forward to the future rather than continue to do it just because we've always done it that way in the past. So I rise to support you. I thank you for commitment. I'd like to hear your comments on where you see the future of the Bureau of Sanitation.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I see the Bureau moving forward into new heights because between the environmental issues that we're concerned about, the citizens that we want to make sure we serve, we want to make sure that we are doing the most effective job that we possibly can in order to deal with our solid waste as well as our trash and all of the other issues that the Bureau of Sanitation deals with. We are very sensitive. I am personally, as well as the Bureau, who has worked so hard in time before I came to do the best job that we can for the city, and we are moving forward to look at new ways that we can do things better. And Councilmember Labange, we are looking at some of the issues with bulky items and how our system works because, you know, we have other outlying issues that will deal with us with regard to how our trucks run, the traffic, the amount of the daily loads that we can take, the landfills that we're currently disposing to. So there are a number of issues that we would have to discuss, but there are certainly areas that we'd be willing to look into. But as you know, and those of you that I have worked with on a number of issues, I'm always open to new ideas, our ability to work with each other, to bring people to the table, to resolve issues and to find solutions to problems. That is what I'm more interested in at this point, and I think that the Bureau is right behind me in that endeavor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I just want to concur with the mayor's recommendation and urge the council to support it. Thank you.
Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Congratulations, Ms. Robinson. I know this is the last department you haven't headed up, so it's good they're finally giving you a full-time job. You can have a full deck. It's been a pleasure working with you in your capacity, both in transportation and housing, and I'm really pleased that the mayor has made this recommendation. Couple things too, and you have a marvelous department in terms of on the bulky item pickups, what Tom was talking about. Now that we have proactive trucks out there doing that, now that we're moving towards some of the recycling projects in multifamily apartments, we're really making some inroads. And even though probably under the budget, we're not going to be able to expand the bulky item drop-off centers just because we haven't been able to find them. We've really made some inroads that I know you will continue the momentum on. As you can probably guess, some of my questions have to do with our TMDL compliance issues. And just wondering, broadly, if you'd like to kind of sketch out some of the things you think that we're going to need to do and some of the leadership you'd like to bring to those issues. Obviously, there's an S with 2 lines through it that we need to draw for any of these things, but give us an idea of what some of your thoughts are.
Well, there's certainly a number of challenges facing the Bureau in time to come. We have the TMDL issue with regard to regulations that are imposed upon us on our stormwater program and multiple years of those regulations coming forth. And the Bureau is already looking at ways that we can make sure that we comply. Most of the I would say all of these issues are costly, and so they're issues that will have to come to the budget. We'll have to be able to say that we'll do it the most cost-effective way possible, but we will have to have capital outlay in order to meet the regulations as they come. But we're committed to doing it and getting ideas from everyone what is the best way to do it and the most cost-efficient way to do it. And we know that in 2006 we have other issues with regard to our landfill issues in the city and how we will approach a different approach to that so that we can, even if it's trash to energy ideas that we're going to look at or rail hauling, but we have a number of things that we'll have on the table that we're already discussing. I'm already setting up meetings with the environmental groups, the regional board, Hilda Bay, Bay Breakers, the leadership in that role so that I can at least begin the dialogue so that we can have a meaningful transition in that area.
Great. And I just met recently with Terry Tamminen, our new EPA head here under Governor Schwarzenegger, and he's very excited to work on some of the river stuff that Councilman Reyes, in his capacity as chair of the River Committee, and 4 others of us have been working on, particularly as we look at Prop 50 funds, which we have been a little bit slow off the bat. Terry really wants to help us try to achieve that. We've talked about a visioning day, not just for Los Angeles, but maybe San Jose and San Diego, so the legislature can get an idea of some of the things that we're doing here so we can do some of the cleanups and the compliance along the way, not just at the end, but source compliance. So,
well, yes, Los Angeles has always been, a leader in so many of these areas, and I wish to continue that along with the Bureau leadership and with the Bureau staff, who is excellent and is forward-thinking in that area.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
You have my full support.
Thank you.
Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I, too, rise in support of you, Rita. Again, I've also enjoyed working with you in the other departments. And I wanted to bring up just 2 issues with you that I just want you to you could respond today or not, but it's something I wish that you would look into and consider. And one of the things that I think there's a direct relation to our TMDL compliance, and that's street sweeping. I just feel like it's very interesting. Of all the issues that I get into my office, I was at a community meeting last night in Wilmington, and it was street sweeping. And people really would like to see their streets being swept regularly. I've been told they are, but sometimes I have complaints of the street sweeper going down the middle of the street where the cars are still parked. And I do think it has a direct correlation to what ends up in our sewers. So I would like you to relook at our system and look at the possibility of really reinstigating a good systematic street sweeping in all of our neighborhoods. I think our neighborhoods want that, and I think it's a service that we should provide. And the other thing is, I find it to be a considerable frustration and problem in the public housing projects with our trash pickup. And it seems to me the system right now is not working. And I would love for you to bring some new insight into that. Maybe it's time to look at how we do that and see if we can figure out how to do it better. But it seems to me to really diminish the quality of life for people, the residents of the housing projects, in terms of the overflow of trash in those industrial-sized containers. So I would love to kind of look at that whole system in our housing projects and see if we might be able to do a better job there.
Well, thank you, Ms. Hahn. I think one of the things that really I have been so privileged and fortunate and probably to be honest, blessed to have worn so many hats, is that my experience with the Department of Transportation and Housing will both address some of the issues that you're talking about with regard to street sweeping, which I know the board would be very interested in working with us, with all the other members of the Department of Public Works, that we'll work together to try to look at a different way that we approach that, and as well as dealing with the housing projects. I did receive a letter regarding the problems at the housing projects that I wasn't aware of, and so we will look into that and try to figure out a way, but having had a relationship with them in my housing role, that will help. So the several hats I can take out of my closet, I can wear them all at once and try to come up with a solution to these things.
Mr. Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. President. Congratulations in advance to you, Ms. Robinson. Look forward to your continued service to the city of Los Angeles. Want to ask you a question. You know, by the way, I think you earlier in response to Mr. Garcetti, you referred to a group called Baybreaker. You meant Baykeeper, right?
Baykeepers,
okay.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I'm not going to repeat that, Mr. Smith, on the live television broadcast here. I happen to think that they're a group that does extraordinary work, and I happen to believe that one of the ways that we achieve change in our society is not just through government, but through private nonprofits suing the government to get the government to follow the law and do the right thing. That's one reason why I've been so concerned about the city's continuing participation in several lawsuits relating to Bay cleanup and stormwater and sewage issues over the past several years. And more often than not, folks haven't agreed with me, but I think we ought to get the city out of these lawsuits. And for a variety of reasons, I'd like to know what your thoughts are. If you could hold my time, please.
Well, I understand that the Bureau has been involved with a number of lawsuits from different agencies, from Hilda Bay, Baykeepers, and a number of other environmental groups that have an interest. But the Bureau itself has an interest in keeping the environment clean. We do not wish to pollute as well. So we want to comply with the regulations, and we want to comply with them judiciously, because we know that we're looking out for the city's best interest with regard to cost, effectiveness, and the results of those. A lot of these lawsuits are our interpretation of them and wanting to make sure we do the best job in order to meet them. We're currently working with Baykeepers, trying to work out a solution so we don't end up in court with them, and that's about as much as I can say about it in a public forum. But we are finding our way through discussions and sitting down with them to work out a situation that's resolvable on both ends. So my hope is that we can come to the table ahead of time so that we don't end up in a litigious situation with them in the future.
Well, I hope you do that. We are. I mean, in the future, we're in litigation right now.
Yes.
And the city is expending hundreds of thousands of dollars. Frankly, I'm sure the figure is more in these lawsuits, which, in my view, that alone it's almost impossible to justify it to constituents. And I do not justify it. I think it is a mistake and a misuse of city funds. So I'm really looking to you to go in there, roll up your sleeves, and do everything that you said you would just do to get the city out of federal court. Because there's one thing that if there's one thing I leave you with today, it's that if you look at the track record of the city of Los Angeles in that building across the street in the federal courthouse on environmental matters, you know, we're 0 for 5, we're 0 for 10, we're 0 for the last 5 or 10 years, with good reason. The city has been wrong. The city has been fighting in court for the right to pollute, and I'm really looking to you to be a champion to get the city out of those lawsuits.
We're currently working in that vein with all honesty, Baykeepers coming to us to say that we'd like to sit down and talk, and that the staff, even prior to my getting there, was already at the table trying to work with them.
Because if the city doesn't settle those lawsuits, for instance, on the sewage case, and the matter is fully litigated in federal court, the penalties are going to go all the way to Washington, D.C. They're not going to be able to be used here in L.A. to make things better. And that would be a real tragedy. Thank you, Ms. Robinson, and good luck to you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Ms. Sikowski.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I too really think this is a great appointment. And Rita, I think you've started to raise some of the concerns, and the only thing I want to underscore, particularly as Mr. Garcetti was asking questions to Mr. Weiss, that I too am obviously concerned about the TMDLs, the whole treatment of our wastewater. We do have to elevate our department, our bureau, to a whole other level. I think they're there. You've got incredible strength and depth in that bureau. It's probably one of the best in the city in terms of knowledgeable expertise and people who do everything from picking up the trash to dealing with very, very complicated new chemical formulas and the like. But one of the things that you mentioned, and I just want to ask you not to mention it softly, but to mention it loudly, is all of that relates to cost, to a big cost. Whether we rail haul, whether we do the TMDLs, how we do them, whether we do them together, whether we do them individually, whether we have to sue sometimes because we don't like the protocol process, sort of an open-ended checkbook. We need you to say loudly, here's where I am, here's where the city is if it wants to do good or do better or do best, but here's what it's going to cost. And you, the council, need to know that. And you, our bureau head, need to be telling us that loudly and clearly. And I will give great kudos to your predecessor, Judy Wilson, because she said that. She said that firmly. She said that loudly. Sometimes she was criticized by saying, you're holding back, you're doing things business as usual. But she wasn't. She was saying, I can only do business as usual because you're giving me this budget. You want to go this high, you want to raise those sewer service charges, you want to raise the sanitation equipment fee, you council want to do this, you council have to do this if you want me to do this. Say that, say it again, work with us, work with everybody who's creative about other alternatives, but other alternatives you know and I know are going to be money, and you can't be shy, hesitant, or fearful. You've got to say it loudly and clearly.
Well, certainly, Councilwoman, I really appreciate that advice, and those of you that have worked with me in the past on options that I brought to the table, whether it was in the CAO's office or in one of my other roles, such as special events with the Department of Transportation, these seats are hot when you're trying to tell the truth of the matter and how much they cost. But you will always get from the Bureau staff, which is excellent and exceptional, as well as from me as the leadership of that Bureau, and the board, the facts of how much it will cost for us to do what we want to do, at different options that you'll have, but the best information that we can bring to you, we will bring to the table.
I appreciate that. I know that's the case, and I just wanted to give you that boost and that reaffirmation.
Thank you.
That we want to hear it, we want to know it, we will defend your right to say it, in fact, demand your right to say it.
And there will be many coming to the table soon.
Thank you.
Mr. Cardenas.
Ms. Robinson, in the few months that I've been here, I certainly have enjoyed my interaction with you, and also my staff compliment you as well for your leadership. And it's obvious when you look at your resume that you have been tapped on the shoulder to be a fix-it person, to be the kind of person that knows how to use management skills, that knows how to bring a department one after another to a higher level. And I'm excited about sanitation moving to a higher level. It's a very interesting place to be because some communities have a totally different relationship with sanitation. And certainly I represent the Northeast San Fernando Valley. We have a very special relationship with sanitation. For example, with bulky item pickups. Just Monday of this week, my staff text paged me and said that they were out there working hard with the Department of Sanitation, and they picked up 25 tons of bulky items. And that wasn't across my district. That was just the first day of 5 days of the hard work that they're going to be doing this week. And the reason why I mention that is because, once again, I just wanted to highlight that some communities might not, who knows, hopefully they're not as bad as my district. They don't even have 25 tons in a given month, thank God. But here in my district, we do, and your department has a big responsibility, and they've been standing up to that responsibility as well. But to talk to you, if you don't mind, I'd like to interject on an issue. Once again, complimenting you on your skills, complimenting you on your qualifications as a leader, and by default, the fact that you're a minority woman, people look up to you. I know they do. I do. And with your leadership skills, how do you feel about the responsibility that people are looking up to you to encourage other minorities and other women to step up to the plate and show their skills and offer themselves to be directors like you, because we don't have enough, in my opinion, and I look forward to the day that we have that diversity at those ranks.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Cardenas. I know that it's an incredible honor to be sitting here, and this morning when I was getting dressed to come and knowing what an important day it was, I just realized in looking in the rearview mirror of my life how many people stand behind me in this effort. And even on the front row of this council chamber sits my family and friends that are here in support. And I will first tell you that it takes hard work, and it takes unloading a lot of the things that you may want to fight as battles. You have to unload that, because a runner doesn't run a race with a backpack on. A runner runs a race with as few things on as they can to get to the end of the line and to win the race. And in this race, with the NAACP here, with many of you that have been so supportive, I know that if you step up to the plate, take on the work that keeps you up all night to do, ask the questions you need to ask, because there's so many people in this room or watching in the computers who have helped me learn how to work a computer when I didn't know how to, from great bosses like Frankie Banerjee that you learn from your parents. My parents are in St. Louis, Missouri today. They can't be here, but my grandparents and my parents, because a young woman, when I think about a young woman growing up in South Los Angeles, going through the public schools of this city, and sitting in this seat today, it is an incredible accomplishment. And my parents that are here, I'm very blessed to have two sets of parents. Dr. William and Lena Thurman are here today. These are my local parents here in Los Angeles, and my uncle, Willie Christian, and my best friend, Denise Johnson, are here. These are the things. I can't tell you how many young people I talk to and just tell them, you know, instead of whining and complaining and everything else that you do your job. If you got enough time to do all of that, you got to do your job, and you got to do the job better. You have to do it excellently. Mediocre just doesn't cut it anymore. Everything has to come to a higher level. The Bureau has to reach a higher goal. We have to want to attain another place. I spent some time just trying to transform myself, making myself better. Instead of blaming everybody else for not being what I wanted them to be, I made myself a better person and a better woman. And it was with the help and many prayers and much strength from the people that are right behind me today on those pews that have sat through here, and those that are out there in every department I've worked in, and every single person I've ever talked to, not rudely, not meanly, but effectively, clearly, and concisely, as George Wolfberg would tell me to do, to make it clear that you've got to do the best job you can on every job you do. And that's why I'm here today.
Well, I appreciate that testimony, and if you could can that every time you talk to somebody who does look up to you, and many people do, and remind them that the fundamentals of what got you where you're at. You talked about hard work, you talked about people who loved you, you talked about people who believed in you, you talked about people who taught you, and I'm sure these people came from all walks of life and they invested in you, but you absorbed it. And one of the things that I think it's very important that people like yourself can really reach into the hearts and minds and the souls of individuals who want to rise to their potential is to remind them that sometimes we put that on ourselves, and we got to get rid of that baggage. We got to take those stones out of that backpack so that we are on the level playing field. So only you can do that. So I appreciate your leadership. I appreciate the responsibility that you hold. And once again, I say it unequivocally, you're here because you earned it. And congratulations. I look forward to your leadership. I look forward to working with you. And I look forward to that Department of Sanitation rising to new heights under your leadership. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Labange?
I just wanted to thank you again, Washington High School graduate. Great to have your family down here. Did you ever take any colleges at Pomona College or all at
Scripps.
all at Scripps there? Okay. Well, Ms. Hahn was talking about earlier about street cleaning. I know it's a different bureau. There's 139 street cleaners in the city of Los Angeles, and I think we're down to 105. And what the point she made was so well, because if trash is not picked up off the street, it gets in the drain. If drain goes down the drain, it goes down the river to Long Beach. You don't want to make Long Beach upset. But it pollutes the ocean. Totally. So I think that working with Bill Robertson, I know I talked to him. There's a hard hiring freeze on sanitation workers right now. So there's no, how about our summer relief program, which is going to come? Is that still frozen? So we have to
for right
discuss
now.
that issue there. But I think I'd like to tie that together somehow, because drains and streets all run together. But Rita, congratulations. And you do have a wonderful family that gives you the great support. And I think this was a very important process, as Greg mentioned when he had his meeting with you in his office, all about how you're going to make this bureau a higher, more effective bureau for all the people of Los Angeles. Congratulations. I'll wait the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. Other members wishing to be heard? Seeing none, time to open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Forthwith, please. Next item.
Next item is item number 24, and that was called special by Councilmember Labange.
Mr. Labange.
Mr. Padilla, after this, or could we, I have a technical amendment on item 43, whenever
Okay,
you
well,
have
let's do that now as Mr. Labange returns to the microphone. Ms. Gruhl.
Yes, if we could reconsider item number 43 for a technical amendment.
Let's open the roll on reconsideration, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
43 now back before us. Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like a technical amendment to add one 6-month renewal option to the action to make it consistent with the original council motion.
Okay.
So I'd ask that we move that
Is there any
amendment.
objection to the amending motion? If not, then let's reopen the roll on item 43 as amended. Please close the roll and tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
That is approved. Next item, please.
Item number 24 was called special by Councilmember Labange.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. As the beginning of council, as we were running around, I wanted to make sure we call this special because it was on our call sheet, and I
Fair.
call it special. But I'd like to defer to Councilmember Miskowski, Chair of the committee, and I know my colleague from the 14th wants to speak, but keep me on the bottom part of the queue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Labange. Yes, colleagues, what I'd like to do is proceed as follows. Ms. Miskowski is Chair of the Public Safety Committee, asking her to provide a framework and a context for this item as it's undergone serious conversation at the committee level. Councilmember Villaraigosa also wishes to chime in. Let's hear from both of them briefly and then turn to the staff who is here. The department's here, the commission's here, others are here. Ask them to come forward. And after we hear from Ms. Miskowski and Mr. Villaraigosa, each for the first time, we'll turn it over to them for their presentation and then continue with council discussion after that. Ms. Miskowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you can see, we have a very stellar array of people approaching because this is a very, very important step we are about to take. On July 22nd of this year, the Board of Police Commissioners adopted a resolution to create something called the Blue Ribbon Rampart Review Panel. The Commission wanted and does want to empower this panel with the mission to analyze the causes and response to the Rampart Police corruption scandal. It's not as if we haven't done this before. We have. But there still is a lingering concern that perhaps there is more to be learned. There's something to be learned in terms of how we went about learning what we were learning, how we attempted to rectify the situation, how we involved a number of other law enforcement agencies, and what we should do about that. In normal police jargon, this is called an after-action report. You have a significant incident, you do an after-action report to analyze. How did we do what we did? Did we do it right? Can we learn from it? In broad terms, that's what this panel is being asked to do. The panel will consist of 9 members, the chief and the commission have designated Ms. Connie Rice, who I think many of us know, as the person to chair this panel. And some have said, gee, the commission did this in July. Why is it now February and we're finally getting here to the council? Because, as you saw back there, there are a lot of discussions, a lot of intricacy about what is going on, what we are looking at, what this panel will look at, and how it looks at it. What are the protocols? Not only as it affects the city of Los Angeles, but as it affects the DA, the U.S. Attorney, criminal justice as we know it, and interacts with each other throughout this region. I will defer, because I know there are others who want to talk generally. Let me tell you that our Public Safety Committee recommended this, and what we are recommending, and the reason we had to, is because there are a couple of issues that the council only can do. We had to grant, we only, the city council, can waive if we think there's a conflict of interest between someone who is going to be doing city work or doing something under the auspices of the city name, who might have a conflict with doing that. There were questions raised about some of the panel members as to whether that conflict existed. We looked at it, we discussed it with the city attorney, and it was the committee's recommendation that the overarching public policy is that we should waive those conflicts and let these people who've been selected go forward and do their job. We, the council, had to authorize something because there's one element here that is different from the consent decree. The consent decree doesn't allow immunity if it comes to the Inspector General and others from learning that something was being done wrong. The Inspector Generals and others at the commission level are supposed to react to it in a way that the consent decree lays out. This panel is going to have the right, if we grant them that right, for administrative immunity. That is, they learn about something, they talk to someone who should have, does have the responsibility in, for instance, the police department, to say, I knew about something that was doing something being done wrong, and I didn't report it. Right now, that person is. This panel, if they learn about that, will both grant anonymity to the person who says it and use immunity if we allow them, and we are recommending it. It's what the city attorney allowed. I do want to specify that we talked to the independent monitor and to the Department of Justice, and they said, fine as far as it goes, but be aware that this panel cannot grant criminal immunity. That is, if they learn of something doing a criminal act, they don't have that capability. They will say that. They will have people who talk to them, whether voluntarily or under a subpoena that might be delivered, to say, don't tell us about criminal stuff. We don't want to know about criminal stuff, and if you do, we can't grant you immunity. Now, they won't necessarily tell the city that they've learned about it, because they hopefully won't learn about it and they won't have to have that process. In general, that's what we're doing here. We are allowing this to be funded by the Police Foundation, which will raise money. We've said it will not be consistent to city contracts, but we will have the Police Foundation share its information as to where it is raising its money from and who this panel is giving contracts to. That will be reported to the city attorney and to us, and we will have regular review on the Public Safety Committee. There is, just in conclusion, before we hear from others, and then I will have some questions for those at the table. And obviously at the table we have the Inspector General Andre Barat. We have the Chief's representative, Deputy Chief McDonald. We have David Cunningham, who's the Police Commission President. We have Ms. Connie Rice, and we have representing the City Attorney Cheryl Mason. So all of them have been participating. As you can imagine, this is detailed, this is protocol, this is what I would call fine-tuning, but there are issues that will need to be discussed and divulged to this council. But my view, the view of the Public Safety Committee, is that we should do this. We do it because there is overarching public policy that hopefully will be attained and achieved. But I do want issues relative to potential risks, some areas where we think there will be lesser risk, disclosed, and we'll talk about that a little bit when I push my button again.
Mr. Villaraigosa.
President, members, thank you for the opportunity to allow me to speak outside of my turn. I have to leave to attend district business, but I did, and so won't be able to vote on this issue, but I did want to indicate my support for this matter. I dare say when you think of the history of Los Angeles and the LAPD, there is no single event quite like Rampart as far as the black stain on the integrity and the honor of the men and women who sacrifice, put their lives on the line for us every single day. And that's why I believe the Chief Bratton and the police department, the League, and the Police Commission are committed to doing everything we can to learn the lessons of what happened at Rampart. From my vantage point, to the extent that we're able to do that, to the extent that we're able to identify the protocols necessary that, to ensure that we never ever revisit this kind of black stain on our department's history, I think we'll be the better for it. Today, the Police Commission asks us to give the panel the right to indemnify and hold harmless where so that they can carry out their responsibilities. I believe that's essential. If we don't do that, we won't be able to ensure that we learn as much as we can. There's no question that when you put protocols together as we attempt to do here, that there may be some situations where people still may be able to sue. You'll never be able to completely hold yourself harmless in that regard. I think what we've done here and what the Police Commission has ensured is that we're going to put protocols together that protect us as much as possible, not completely. That world doesn't exist, but it does allow us to be able to do the work that we need to do, to learn the lessons that we need to learn, to then implement the reforms that are going to be so necessary to ensure that this never happens again. So I thank the Police Commission for their work. I thank Chief Bratton for his leadership, and I look forward to working with the panel and reviewing this work in the days to come.
Thank you, Mr. Villaraigosa. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a number of questions I want to ask, but I just want to say right off the top that I really don't like this proposal, and I'll tell you why. We're reopening something that we've closed. The Los Angeles Police Department needs to get beyond Rampart. We're never going to get beyond it if we keep opening up and talking about it. We're finishing up with the final lawsuits that have come forward. The Finance Committee is dealing with those last lawsuits that are coming forward from this. We're moving on. We have a chief that's reformed the department. We're doing things right, and I think we're moving forward. And to reopen this just opens old wounds and exposes us to more criticism and more legal exposure, which I'm not happy about. I want to ask you a question, Mr. Commissioner or Mr. Chief. What are you going to learn from this that we don't already know?
First off, I want to thank the City Council for giving us this opportunity to come today and present to you our blueprint proposal for the Blue Ribbon Rampart panel.
Okay. All right.
We have taken some time to think through many of the operational issues which are before you today. First off, without question, the City of Los Angeles has taken some very bold steps in terms of attempting to achieve broad-based police reform. Most importantly, in June of 2001, the consent decree was approved with the goal of trying to avoid costly and divisive litigation. In that context, that consent decree set a floor for best practices in police management. But despite that, the Police Commission and Chief Bratton have posed some fundamental questions, which are, what are the lessons that have been learned from the Rampart incident, and what institutional changes can we impose that will demonstrate good policy? In fact, we've gotten buy-ins from the Federal Monitor and the Department of Justice. So our goal here is to go beyond merely the floor of best practices, but to really do a diagnostic examination. And the Commission and the Chief of Police concluded that the best way to do this is to bring out highly respected individuals who are reform advocates from outside of the department to say that this department is about openness and accountability, and to make that statement unequivocally. In that regard, over the past several months, we've gone to some of the best legal talent in this city, some of the top law firms, and we've asked them to support us not just in terms of publicly, but also financially, and they have stepped up to the plate. They have offered and donated over $100,000 and are continuing to make donations. So I think that demonstrates that there are significant questions that remain to be answered, and certainly that the mission here is a good one. It's not designed to target individuals or to reopen prosecution, but rather to look at the lessons that were learned and to determine if there are additional institutional changes that can make this a better department. And I hope that you share my enthusiasm for this effort when your questions are answered. I'd like to turn it to Connie Rice, if you have some questions.
Why don't we,
you'd like to
if it's
respond.
okay with you, Mr. Smith.
Restart the clock, please.
I'll retain your time, and we'll hear a presentation from staff and some of our guests here today. Okay?
Thank you.
Great. You wanted to speak, Ms. Rice, next? Okay. Ms. Rice, welcome.
Thank you. Mr. President and council members, thank you very much for this opportunity. And Councilman Smith, your question is absolutely right. When I was first asked to do this, I said no. And I said many of the same things that you said. But when I was asked a third and a fourth time, and the chief called me and said, I need you to do this, I said, well, I'm not going to agree to. I'm going to go ask the stakeholders who were involved in Rampart, and I'm going to ask them, were all the answers received? Did we send someone with scalp cancer to the hairdresser, or did we get her chemotherapy? Do we need to go any further? Did we drill down to the limestone? And the second entity that I called were the leadership of the rank and file. And I said, give me some more reasons to say no. And they said, we want you to do this, Connie, because all of the answers were not drilled down to the limestone. And we'll work with you. I said, I'm not doing this alone. We already have 4 good reports. They go to a certain level. They're managerial, they're organizational, they're structural. They map a decline in mediocrity and a slip in standards. All of those reports, as far as they go, are good and solid. But what the cops were telling me, and I said, I'm not doing this unless you think that this helps you. And they said, we didn't attach it and drill down to the mentality and the political drivers. We didn't find out what happened to the whistleblowers. We didn't find out what happened to the after-action report, what happened to the civil grand jury. Nobody else, what happened to the investigations? Why couldn't the investigations be better coordinated? We still don't know the answers to those things. And they listed a number of other things, Councilman. So I was kind of shocked by that. I thought for sure, because I told the chief I would not do this unless I had the league and other police representatives willing to roll up their sleeves and get in the co-pilot seat with me, because otherwise you don't need another report from blue ribbon people. But if the cops are willing to say, finally, we want to get out our deeper reasons that the other reports didn't get to, and Connie will help you do that. I said, all right, I'll do it, but if you abandon me, the report will be very short. It'll be short and sweet. So I had your exact reaction, and I fully respect that reaction, but I also was surprised that when I went to the DA, when I went to all the other entities, that I said, if we look at this, we're going to have to look at it, and we know it's not a happy story. Do you want to do this? And the answer was, you need to do it. I have a lot of other things to do. I'd be very glad not to do this. But I really, when I was told by those different interests, do this, that's why I'm here.
I'd like to have a presentation from Chief.
Yeah, thank you. Just real briefly, from the department's perspective, this gives us an opportunity to have a set of independent eyes come in from the outside, take a look at the department, and to integrate all the prior looks that were done. And I think what we had was we had a lot of people who worked very hard and looked at different segments of the department, looked at what caused Rampart to occur the way it did, what was done in the wake of Rampart. But I think it was done with great intention, but it was done in silos. And I think what this panel can do is to look at what was done previously, to build on that, and then to integrate the prior reports together so we come away with an objective, outside, comprehensive look at what happened, where we need to go if we haven't taken all the steps we could have taken to be able to build on that. As long as officers still go to court and are asked by defense attorneys, have you ever worked Rampart? With an eye towards clouding the jury or setting the floor that the officer is on the defensive. As long as that continues to occur, and it is, then I think we certainly need somebody to come in from the outside, and I can't think of a better group than has been selected here to be able to do that objectively.
Thank you. Any other presentations from our guests? Okay,
If
we'll
you
turn
please
to
hold my
Mr.
time
Smith.
for a little bit, because you ran off about a
You
minute
got
of it. Chief, I appreciate what you just said, but nothing's going to change that. Those attorneys are going to still ask that question. The scar is there, it will remain for a long time,
Right.
and the more we keep this open and talking about it, the more the scar is going to be open and talked about in public. And so I don't see why that changes that dynamic. More importantly, I ask you, you talked about all these things that we had done, that were finished, but not connected together. Why can't you do that within the department?
Well, I think that we could take another task force of officers, put them together, and look at that, but when all is said and done, it's still the LAPD policing itself. And I think that because of...
Well, you were talking about, we weren't talking about policing itself. You're talking about missing issues that connected reports you already got.
Yeah, but from
This is staff stuff. This isn't blue panel stuff.
Well, it goes to general credibility of the department and our ability to be able to go out and say, we're a transparent organization, take a look at us. Whoever wants to look, feel free to. Walk away with your findings, let us know what you find, and we'll deal with that. We're looking, if there is still open issues that need to be addressed, and those can be identified by outside objective eyes, then we want to know about them and we want to deal with them.
Councilman Smith, if I could add to that, public trust is a key component of the success of LAPD. The Federal Monitor has repeatedly gone back to, at the end of the day, what's important for having a safe city, one where people can come, live, work, and play, is that there is a belief in, there is a degree of trust in LAPD and its ability to police. This Blue Ribbon panel is saying we are unafraid to open the department up to an examination of what has occurred and ask some of the tough questions. And who better to have asking those questions than people who make it their job to be reform advocates, so that there will be no question that this is an independent analysis, and it will be rigorous, and we stand prepared to allow that.
Commissioner, I have no problem with that comment. The problem I have is, and I look at number 2 on this report, dealing with the makeup of the commission you've chosen. And I'll just say this, I have always said that it is wrong for the City of LA to allow its commissioners and or blue panelists or whatever to continually sue the City of LA, to utilize and use our resources, particularly at a time when we are very strapped for resources. I sit with Mr. Parks on that Budget Finance Committee, and every Tuesday we go after lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. So many are frivolous, and so many are brought by people that are on this panel. Totally frivolous lawsuits, harassment lawsuits. And I sometimes vote to settle those matters, and I hold my nose and say, why am I doing this? It really irks me. We're doing it because it's the cheapest way out sometimes. And I say to myself, this is not right. And so when I look at the wording that you've put in your report that says, well, these people on this commission will never sue the city over anything they find in the course of this project. However, we're giving them status to sue us in the future because they can say, we looked in LAPD, and somewhere down the road they're going to file some other lawsuit against us, some frivolous lawsuit that now has greater standing in court because the court's going to say, you know what, that attorney actually participated in this review panel, and they really do know LAPD. And so I think we're creating our own enemies in the future. And I have nothing but absolute respect for Ms. Rice and what she's done for this city. I'm not talking about you, Connie, but there are some other people, and I won't use those names, but there are people on this panel that sue us virtually every month of the year. And so many times it's frivolous and wasteful of the city attorney's time, the police department time, and our resources as a city, and our citizens, taxpayers' money that go to defending these cases that are really frivolous. And all we're doing is giving them status to sue us again in the future because they say in court, I was there, I was inside LAPD, and I know that this is real, not frivolous. And I think we're just creating ourselves trouble in the future. I respect greatly, Chief, what you've said. I respect with absolute admiration Connie and our Chief of Police, and although this Chief didn't call me on this, nor did any Commissioner, if it was that important, I think somebody would have called me, but nonetheless, I respect what you want to do here. I think it is misguided. And I have some real concerns about item number 2 and the panel you have chosen. And I would therefore, Mr. President, move that we take number 2 out of the report and deal with it as a separate issue and talk about the rest of the report and item number 2 separately.
Okay.
Do I have a second for that?
That's seconded by Mr. Zine. Mr. Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Smith, listen, I'm almost tempted to ask Ms. Gruhl to amend her commissioner proposal. Maybe we could also ban commissioners from suing the city. Write that down. And we could ban the members of this commission from fundraising. I mean, I think then we all agree and all get along. I hear what you're saying, Mr. Smith, and I respect it, and I know that you're taking that position out of your desire to be a strong financial steward for this city, and I recognize that that is the vein in which it's offered. I believe, and Cheryl White Mason, Connie Rice, correct me if I'm wrong, that there are actually professional reasons relating to these attorneys' professional reputations and professional ramifications why that is something that is much less of a concern. Is that something that either of you can address?
Well, I want to go back to the whole question.
I mean, they're pledging.
I want to go back to the question on the composition of the panel for a moment. You know, lawyers are advocates, and we also, in a broader sense, understand the impact that the Rampart incident has had on our judicial system, even beyond just the criminal justice system. In that regard, when we went out to seek financing for this particular project, we went to law firms, and we disclosed to them the names. Many of these names I've dealt with. They've applied for positions in LAPD. They are highly respected in their area. The law firms were firms such as O'Melveny and Myers, Gibson and Dunn and Crutcher, Stratton Arps, a few others. The bottom line is they were esteemed conservative law firms, but they understood the importance of bringing in these outside reform advocates. So I would assert to you that the issue of the frivolity of it, in fact, it signals an openness and a willingness to be accountable. And I'd urge you to be aware of that component on this.
Could I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Councilman Weiss, in response to your question, each panel member was chosen for a specific reason. I need this team to do this job. We are not going to have 80 and 90 lawyers like the previous commissions. The people who were chosen are respected across the board for what they understand about LAPD, its culture, and its history. They are not fungible, and they are not exchangeable with other people. So, with great respect, I am asking for the team that has been put together. We have worked for over 7 months very closely with the city attorney and the inspector general to protect the interests of the city, which is of prime importance, and to balance that with the independence of this group. Accordingly, all 9 members of the panel will sign an agreement which takes us out of any future lawsuits that can in any way be attached to what we learn in this review. Also, under the terms of the waiver of the conflict, there are a whole bunch of other obligations that we undertake in this bizarre, unlikely alliance. It is not the animal that you're used to seeing, but it is precisely the promise therein that you will get something that you haven't gotten before in terms of analysis. So, with that, I think we've worked a long time over the last 7.5 months with the city attorney to make sure that the conflicts that are inherent, in fact, we were chosen because of our conflicts, that the city's interests are indeed taken care of.
And I think that ought to be good enough for this body. Indeed, I fail to see how it could not be good enough for anybody. Now, I know that we are financial stewards, and this is a tougher time than ever to be a financial steward in this city. But we're also constitutional stewards in this city, and it is our sworn obligation to make sure that each and every city employee, including and especially police officers, follow the Constitution, follow the law, and respect civil rights, that they have done so in the past, and that they will do so in the future. You know, in fact, this commission, it's going to be called the Rice Commission, and too much to your chagrin, and you chagrined at that. But you could call it, if you don't like that, you could call it the Santayana Commission, because this is truly about being desirous to learn from the past so that we do not repeat those mistakes in the future. That is why it is so extraordinarily impressive and so truly unprecedented to have the leadership, the sworn leadership of the department, the entirety of the brass, the sworn civilian leadership of the department, the police commission, the police reform internal leadership of the department, signified by Mr. Barat, and the dedicated leadership of the Police Protective League coming together saying, throw the sunlight on this issue and get it all out in the open so that we don't have these sorts of issues arise in the future. Given that alliance, if the elected leadership of this city shows any hesitation in going forward, that would send an unfortunate and, in my view, devastating signal to the people of this city about our commitment to civil rights. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weiss. Ms. Miskowski, I know, deferred some of her questions from Mr. Villaraigosa, so we're going to return to her for a first time, and then to be followed by Mr. Labange and Mr. Zine.
Thank you, Mr. Garcetti. Having heard my two colleagues, Mr. Smith and Mr. Weiss, there is some truth in both. I don't think not going forward would be devastating, but I think this does present us an opportunity. Clearly, this is an opportunity with some risk, and I think in full and fair disclosure, we should have some of that risk disclosed. The city attorney has been working with Ms. Rice and with the commission and the department to minimize that risk. But as we know, we can't be risk-free. I agree and believe that the people who are on the panel, some of whom have been involved in litigation against this city, on police matters, dealing with retaliation, dealing with use of force, I mean, they are right there in the thick of it. That's why Ms. Rice says we need them. Who better to be judging and working on and looking at than somebody who really gets it, somebody who knows where things maybe still need to be fixed or tweaked a little bit. Mr. Smith was not correct in saying we're done with our Rampart cases, we're getting down to the end. Members, we are just getting to the hard part. We had 200 or more claims, Rampart, and more than 100 of those turned into lawsuits. We are doing settlement. We see here settlement after settlement after settlement. And what does the city attorney have to tell us? We're settling because these are bad facts. We either had officers that we thought had done bad things, and so we sure don't want them on the witness stand. But members, we've got 100 cases left from Rampart. And those are what we think are the good cases. The cases where you're not going to see a settlement here. The cases where we're empowering our city attorney and our police department to say, we did right. This arrest, this guy was, was arrested. We think it was a good arrest. We think we had good officers. They aren't the ones we found. Those are coming forward. We spent $30 million so far in settling the cases. We've got another $40 million in our Rampart Extraordinary Fund. But we've got the toughest cases, or the cases to go in front of the jury right now. So at that time, while we're doing this, we may have some issues out there that can affect that. Notwithstanding that, I agree, and the committee agreed. I do want to say, though, that we shouldn't go into it blindly. And I would like to ask at this time the city attorney to, Ms. Mason, would you tell us your concerns, how you're going to work on the protocols, what the risks are that you are continuing to engage Ms. Rice with, and I think we did talk in the back that whatever we engage, whatever the protocols are, you expect, and I know Ms. Rice agrees, to have a full meeting with the panel ahead of time, so that it's not just words, it's not Mr. Weiss's interpretation or my interpretation, it's clear, it's delineated, it's specific. But members, this can be beyond Rampart. If this panel finds things that weren't done right, weren't done far enough, this panel hopes to find that and hopes to tell us and hopes to make the correction path. But as such, it does put us at some financial, I don't even want to use the word risk, but there may be exposure. We need to know it. We are still knowing it and going forward, but at least let's do it as temperately as possible, as well advised as possible, as legally controlled as possible, not shutting anything down. And I've had a little disturbance here when I say, you know, the city attorney advises this, but panel members or the commission or someone says, but if you do that, then we can't do our work. We can do your work. You can do your work. We've given a lot of latitude. We are giving what we think is reasonable under the best advice of the city attorney. City attorney, let me ask you now how you are working through some of these things and what your expectations are.
Thank you, Councilman Nisikowski and other council members. The City Attorney's Office is also pleased to reach today where we feel we are supporting, at the request of the police chief and the police commission, what could be a very decisively forward step in the reform efforts of the police department. We started out to evaluate the legal implications as the proposals were made for what the panel might do and what its composition might be. In general, the kinds of areas we were concerned about is the one Councilman Nisikowski has directly related to, which is specifically the fact that Rampart litigation is still pending and would be pending at a time when the results of the report and/or publicity about Rampart would be generated. That was one type of risk we considered. The other risk has to do with the fact that we would be giving substantial access to confidential information to a group of citizens who were not actually employees of the City of Los Angeles, and whether or not that raised concerns about privacy, liability, or greater exposure in litigation than would otherwise be the case. In all of those categories of risk, what we weighed was the risk of doing nothing. And what I would say is that we've got a challenge in the Rampart litigation, whether or not this report is done, and there's going to be newspaper articles about Rampart, whether or not the Blue Ribbon panel is doing something about Rampart. I think on balance, I would just as soon be in court saying, this is a city that cares. We didn't do some of the things we're being charged with doing, and the evidence is that we continue to move forward to make improvements. So from a litigation perspective, we became comfortable from the city attorney's point of view that, yes, there are some risks, but there are some risks either way. On the issues of confidentiality, privacy, liability to third parties who may object to content of the report, we have worked with the panel and with other members of the city family to structure as best we can confidentiality agreements, conflict of interest agreements. We believe they provide a great deal of protection to the city. There is no foolproof way to protect this panel or to protect the city itself from the disclosure of certain types of information, but we do feel comfortable that the panel has agreed to undertake written agreements for confidentiality and conflict of interest provisions that will protect the city. I've had conversations with the panel members themselves about the litigation they've been involved in and what they see prospectively, and negotiated that provision that they would agree not to undertake certain types of litigation. That had to do not so much with, for me, the conflict of interest, but anything that would undermine their objectivity. I didn't want them to have the incentive to write the report to support a particular piece of litigation, and they are not. They've agreed in their conflict of interest agreements not to undertake litigation that would be based on their own work. So in other words, I think it frees them to also be objective, hopefully, in terms of their findings and their report. So we have undertaken to take care of many of those areas of risks. There is one area I would like to comment on, particularly given the proceedings, some of the recommendations of certain parts of the city family, which had to do with whether or not the panel should operate pursuant to some of the rules that directly affect the Inspector General of the Police Commission. The Public Safety Committee did not pass on the recommendation that they comply specifically with those protocols. The city attorney is comfortable that we can work with the panel. We are counsel to the panel if you once the panel is fully appointed and agreed, and we will work with them for processes that are appropriate in terms of their disclosure and protection of confidential information, but also to ensure that in the rare likelihood they do address facts that suggest criminal activity, that they as panel members, who all are lawyers and many of them are experienced prosecutors, will make an appropriate judgment about how that information should be handled and to whom it should be reported. The Inspector General has very specific protocols that were designed specifically for his function and his office, and we agree that simply imposing them upon this panel is not appropriate, but it is with the expectation that this panel will in fact, however, be addressing areas of risk and carrying out the high public responsibility of ensuring that we are not fostering or supporting known criminal activity. If there are any other questions?
The only
am I
other
missing?
question I would like you to quickly address, the issue that we had been discussing is, as I understand generally, the report as presented was acceptable to the panel, with the exception on page 2 of item 1C2, which now reads, panel protocols for obtaining appropriate conflict of interest waivers from outside agencies and for providing the opportunity of such agencies to review those portions of the draft report applicable to the agency only insofar as the confidential privilege material associated with it is not improperly disclosed, that there has been, per Ms. Rice's suggestion, the perception is that the draft report would have to be sent to the DA, the U.S. Attorney, et cetera, first for their approval, and that is not what this says. What this meant to say, and I think does say, is only that portion of the report where another agency who might have disclosed privileged information pursuant to protocols that you will establish, that report be reviewed just to make sure that privileged information in a document is not disclosed, not only for our liability, but for the liability of the entity who provided the document. And I understand that there has now been a suggestion that be changed to say that the city attorney shall stand as the reviewer of the draft report relative to confidential or privileged material, not only from the city attorney's office, but from other entities, to determine whether or not, just to make sure that in a final report there isn't a disclosure there, inadvertent or otherwise. And I appreciate that these are all attorneys and they know what they're doing, but I just think that we need to have that protocol ensured so that a document, a reference to a document, a reference to something, doesn't disclose something that some other agency felt was privileged that is not. And you have indicated you are willing to do that and to discuss that if you reach that bridge and it's a problem with both Ms. Rice, the panel members, and the outside agency to ensure, to your satisfaction, our city attorney's satisfaction, that something in that report won't jeopardize us relative to that element.
If I could just comment, Councilwoman, we certainly will be reviewing the final report first to ensure that the city's confidential and privileged information is not reviewed. And what we have agreed with Ms. Rice, and I think is contemplated, is that there will be some interchange with the agencies ahead of time that will involve the city attorney in terms of protocols for information they're going to provide and what level of review or assurance they need at the end of the report. I don't think it is possible for us to review and take responsibility for whether the other agencies are comfortable with the report for the city attorney, because we may not know all of their interests, and at the same time, we agree or understand that having them have the right to actually review the document in all cases may not be appropriate. So what the city attorney intends to do is first work ahead of time, before information is provided, to be sure the agencies have agreed upon a protocol with the panel and the city attorney that they are comfortable with. And then we will work with the panel after the report to ensure that that protocol for review and handling of privileged information or confidential information has been followed. So there will be a little bit of a case by case, but we will be doing a review and we'll have responsibility as well for interacting with those other agencies.
All right, well, then I would like to amend that item to stay and said the opportunity to such agencies to review this report, providing the opportunity that the city attorney shall review those portions of the draft report that relate to the other applicable agencies and their privileged information to ensure that there's not been inappropriate disclosure.
Thank you.
Page 2, section C2, not item 2, item C sub 2, says here that the opportunity of other outside agencies shall be granted to review the portion of the draft applicable to that agency. I'm inserting instead, providing the opportunity to the city attorney essentially to review those portions of the draft report applicable to other agencies, only insofar as to ensure that there isn't confidentiality breached by those other agencies, empowering the city attorney to make those judgments. Because the city attorney is already going to be involved with the panel and with those other agencies in the first part of this to set up the protocols. So they set up the protocols, the other agencies are satisfied, give documents, a report comes out, city attorney reviews that to make sure that those protocols have been adhered to as it applies. I'm not looking at judgments, I'm not looking at statements, I'm looking at disclosure of something as that another agency may have given. So it's a double check. First check, protocols are set up, agreed to, documents given, report written, city attorney makes sure that there wasn't a disclosure, a slip, an error, unintentional, that refers in the report to another agency's document that ought not to be there.
Okay, we have a motion. I want to make sure we have a second before we proceed. Mr. Smith seconds.
I just want to ask Ms. Kowski for clarification, if I may.
Okay, because we're not ready to vote on this yet, and I have a number of speakers waiting to be heard.
I just want to clarify,
If it's quick.
if I may. Is there a section in here which refers to the front end of the protocol establishment, which in my view seems to be where the city attorney and where Ms. Rice, I think, are properly convinced that most of the decisions that need to be made are going to be made, and I'd be more comfortable.
I think the city attorney and Ms. Rice agree with what I just enunciated. And I think if they both acknowledge it.
I second. That's the question.
That this is addressing Ms. Rice's concern that as it's written, this would go to a U.S. attorney. This would go to the DA, and they would make a judgment in looking at that portion of the report which referred to something. They would make that judgment. This changes that, so the city attorney makes that judgment. Front end, agreed on. Back end, agreed on.
I just didn't hear a discussion of the front end part in this. I heard all back end and no front end. But I'll let them comment, and I appreciate
And it'll come back around. Let me recognize Mr. Ludlow, if it's quick.
I just wanted
and
to
then proceed to the
have
speaker.
Ms. Rice address that, if you could, just for 1 second.
Okay. I'll address both, Councilman. Councilman Weiss, I have agreed that anytime I sit down with an outside agency, and if, in the unlikely event I need to look at their documents, we will agree to a protocol, and the city attorney will co-develop that protocol with us. That's already agreed to. And then on the other end, we've agreed to a process. The city attorney is the one entity, along with the commission, that will be able to preview the report, and solely for the checks of privilege and confidential and preservation of confidential material. And we will, case by case, in the unlikely event the report does refer to confidential material in other agencies' documents, we will ensure with that agency, we'll find a process that's appropriate for each agency to make sure that how we discuss that material is satisfactorily addressed according to the protocols. And of course, there's also the added obligation as attorneys under the professional code that we have to preserve those confidences as well.
Okay. I have next Mr. Zine, followed by Mr. Parks, Mr. Ludlow, Mr. Cardenas, and Mr. Labange. Each for a first time. For a second time, wishing to be heard is Mr. Weiss, as well as Mr. Smith. Mr. Zine.
That's what that means. You mentioned other agencies. As I understand from the committee hearing we held, we're examining systems within the LAPD. My question is, what are we doing with other agencies if we're examining systems within the LAPD that went haywire, which led to Rafael Perez, Nino Durden, and whoever else was involved in illegal activities? Why would we be dealing with other agencies when we're trying to examine and explore what went wrong in LAPD? What does the U.S. Attorney, the DA, have to do with LAPD, with running the systems that we have in LAPD, which I thought is the focus of your Rice panel?
Councilman Zine, excellent question. You're absolutely right. The primary focus is on the lessons learned from the Rampart scandal and how it was handled. In addition to that, what went wrong with the investigations? What went right with the investigations? Do we need a protocol to coordinate future investigations, which is an issue that's been raised by U.S. Attorney, the DA, and everybody else I talked to in trying to figure out whether this should even be done? one of the things that all of the other agencies, because there were a number of agencies that had a role in responding to Rampart, and we've been asked to assess all of the responses to Rampart, including the judiciaries. We'll be sitting down with judges who have done a report on the judicial response to Rampart. This was not just about LAPD. This was about our entire criminal justice system.
So it's a broader focus than
Yes.
what I was led to believe, that it was a narrow focus on LAPD. But we're examining the criminal justice system basically of the realm within Los Angeles County.
In response to the Rampart scandal. And I'm sorry if you thought it was narrower. It's been in the operation documents from the beginning, and it's always been the understanding that we need to assess the response. One of the things that was specifically asked for, which Chicago and New York City have, which we did not have, in response to a scandal of this magnitude, often the different jurisdictions trip and stumble over one another. And there's been a very serious suggestion from all of the agencies that responded to Rampart that that's what happened here. We will take a look at that and see whether that's an accurate description of the lack of coordination amongst the U.S. Attorney, the DA, the police department, and so forth. Is there a better way to do it? And they've asked us to come up with an investigation protocol that the different agencies are to set up a process that will produce an investigation protocol so that the next time something like this happens, you won't get these investigations tumbling over one another the way they did. So I'm sorry if it wasn't clear. I should have made that clearer to you, and I apologize for that. But the scope has always been to look at the other agencies as well, to learn. They also want to know how to do it better.
With that in mind, and I understand the funding is coming from private sources, and I would ask that while we're dealing with these outside law firms, how many of these law firms have received business from the city attorney's office on conflict cases? And we want to talk about commissioners in ethics code and violating and supporting political candidates. I would question the law firms that have donated this $100,000+. How many of those law firms have received work from the city attorney's office and been paid for that work? And are we going to those firms and saying, hey, give us something back because we're doing this outside, we're doing this investigation with funding from you? I would be curious about that, because I know this whole realm of funding creates a big question. And then when I heard that we've gone to these firms, and I know the city attorney conflicts out on a number of cases, how many of those firms have we contacted who've given us money, which is the same as what we're dealing with the commissioners in a whole other arena of politics. The PD, how much staff from the PD is going to be allocated to this? How much staff from the city attorney is going to be allocated to this? Do we have the staff to support Ms. Rice and what she's going to do with the panel that she's convened?
Well, indeed, I want to answer the fundraising aspect of it, because I think it's connected to your question of whether or not the scope of this is narrow. It's been made clear that analyzing LAPD in isolation isn't enough, that the issue is our entire judicial system and the impact of some of the missteps that it's had. The law firms understood that, and it has not been viewed as a political fundraising activity, but a reform-based activity, is going through the police foundation through their donations. With respect to LAPD personnel, I'll have the chief respond to that.
Yeah, we haven't identified exactly yet what support staff will be necessary, but I think it's a question of we can't afford not to. Based on where we're going with the vision of this whole Blue Ribbon panel, we're totally committed to it, and we'll make sure that whatever support is requested will be given.
Well, see, that's a concern I have, Chief, is that when I look at the number of officers we have in the LAPD today,
right,
we have more than we had a number of years ago. And I read an article in the Daily News that we don't have enough officers to enforce traffic regulations, and we got horrendous collisions and people dying in collisions because the chief of the valley and the captain of the valley says, we don't have enough personnel to put in uniform to go patrol the streets. We've got a tremendous amount of resources spread around anti-terrorist division, internal affairs, consent decree, and the numbers of the department, the personnel numbers have increased significantly from the past, and we don't have people working the streets, and we got people dying. So the question I have, if we're going to allocate more personnel to this, which I'm not saying this isn't important,
right,
how many more bodies are we going to take out of the field to staff this in administrative operations versus bringing back some retired people or getting some overtime from these outside law firms instead of stripping more and more people from the functions that we have to do in the field, whether it's a detective working a homicide desk or a robbery desk or the motor officer or the metro officer. I mean, we have spread it so thin, and I analyze it and I say, we've got more officers than we had before, but there's nobody out there doing the job. And we've got all these priorities that aren't providing the protection for the public when it comes to uniformed enforcement.
Councilman Zine, we
Thank
think
you.
those are excellent questions.
Well,
And
I've been
in fact-
writing these down because I wanted to make sure I was on target.
But in
to-
fact, we're anticipating those questions.
Okay.
The reality is that this panel is volunteering their time. In addition, the law firms that we have solicited have also agreed to offer voluntary time either through attorney time and/or through various administrative resources. In fact, it's our conclusion this will not have any impact on LAPD personnel.
Okay,
It's
that-
specifically designed to do that. This is a volunteer effort with the exception of investigators. And Ms. Rice, if you want to respond and go into that in a little more detail.
And I also
I
asked the
would
city
like
attorney
to-
because
Yes.
as the personnel chair, the city attorney comes to me and says, we need 4 more attorneys for this. And then the department comes to me and say, we need 4 more positions to fill this. And the inspector general says, we don't have enough personnel there. And I'm saying, wait a second, we don't have enough to go around and we're going to add more that we don't have. And Chief Park, Councilman Park says, we don't have any more money in the budget.
And we certainly understand that, and in fact, have factored that into the blueprint for operations.
Okay.
But I'd like for Ms. Mason
Yes.
to respond.
I would like to respond on one point, which is the fundraising. The city attorney's office has not been directly involved in any of the fundraising. I do think it is important, and I think the current recommendation is that there be a report and disclosure on the results of that fundraising so that we then do avoid any appearances
evil.
or actual conflicts. But I think at this point, the solicitation is being done quite independent of any relationship the city attorney or recommendations the city attorney may have for attorneys who work with the city. But I do think it is important that the council receive reports as to the fundraising at the end. As to staffing, I will say that we have been asked and think it is important as the city attorney's office to be involved. There is no question that it will impose some burden on the city attorney's office to provide support. We believe it is doable. I accept the reality that I'll probably spend some nights and weekends I wouldn't otherwise spend, but we do think it is doable without additional personnel in the city attorney's office, and again, undertake it with the view that if this is a successful project, ultimately it will help the city reduce some of its liability and legal work. So we're putting in some work now in hopes that this all lends to less legal work in the future.
I got one final wrap-up. Councilmember Sikowski mentioned currently 100 cases associated with Rampart haven't been resolved. Question, which falls into the Brown Act, which they're going to be required to comply with, how many of the panel attorneys that we have on this Blue Ribbon Commission have a part in any of those 100 pending cases?
None.
None of them.
No, that was one of the things we reviewed.
Right.
They are not, at least in terms of disclosure or attorneys of record, none of them are involved in the pending Rampart litigation, and part of their confidentiality, conflict of interest agreement is that they will not file such a lawsuit in the future.
Okay.
As-
I know, and I've met with you, and I know your sincere interest and desire to make this thing happen and do it right, but these questions that didn't come up during the Public Safety Committee meeting that are coming up now are coming up because we continually percolate more questions as we go down this path, and then once it's confirmed, then you get the green line to get what you do. But I appreciate your dedication, and no criticism on you, any of the members who are at the table today. It's just these are burning questions that have been popping for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zine.
I just have one question that
Yes.
doesn't bar us from coming back and asking for more officers, does it?
I'm sure you will, Mr. President.
The next speaker will be Mr. Labange, but before I call Mr. Labange, let me indicate, members, we have 10 members, and so we need to stay here to get through this. Mr. Padilla has indicated he will be able to be back in the chamber when we deal with the executive session items because Mr. Parks has to recuse himself, but we need everyone here. Mr. Labange, did you want to skip them? Okay, then let me recognize Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a couple of questions, one for Ms. Mason. When you spoke about the issue of the exemptions or that the attorneys sign as far as not using material for future lawsuits, does that also prohibit them appearing as expert witnesses or also sharing information as others prepare lawsuits?
It does prohibit them from participating in litigation in any manner. That's the way that we have phrased it, and certainly our interpretation would be that prohibits them from participating voluntarily as an expert witness. What we are not able to control on behalf of the city or the panel is someone being subpoenaed to testify, and at that point, we would be using all of our legal advocacy in terms of privileges and agreements to limit the scope of their testimony, but we do think they've agreed not to be voluntarily expert witnesses against the city or individual police officers.
The other question I had is that we mentioned at committee yesterday that we talk about the criminal justice system, and I think the necessity of looking at the entire criminal justice system, and I think the police department's on record of supporting the LA County Bar review, which was the first and I think only review. But we asked at the committee that when we talk about criminal justice, that we ensure that in addition to the DA, U.S. Attorney, that the City Attorney's Office is involved as part of that review. It didn't make it into this report, but certainly I think if we're going to talk about the criminal justice system, we can't deal with it in LA City without addressing that. So we'll ask again to see if we can get that included in the report.
It was my understanding that that is an intent of the panel to also look at the role of the City Attorney's Office.
Okay.
That's great.
The one comment that I'll make on this, and I think we have a motion that deals with the issue of the makeup of the panel. And one thing, and I mentioned it at the public safety yesterday, I certainly would like to see a more balanced panel in the sense of those who defend cities as well as those who sue them, which would give us a much more balanced approach. But also, my concern is that I understand that attorneys sue cities, but the other side of it is that we have an instance in where one of the attorneys is actually a plaintiff in a lawsuit, which in my judgment puts us in a different situation as opposed to defending someone or suing in behalf. We actually have an attorney as a plaintiff. And so I voted against that and want to again express my concern that it seems to add significantly to our liability as it relates to when people are suing and we're getting close to settling or in close in settlement conferences that actually one of the attorneys is a plaintiff.
And if I could respond on that particular lawsuit, the matter has been settled. And I think it is important, too, that the person was a plaintiff because she suffered an injury during a demonstration, the issue, of course, being whether or not the police or the city was liable for it. I don't think participation in the panel particularly increases or decreases that kind of risk for the city. It is really much more the functioning as lawyers or witnesses that I think we should be concerned about, and we have tried to address that issue.
Okay. And then I have one question for Mr. Rice. The only comment that concerned me at the committee the other day was the comment of expressing clearly that you're concerned about the systemic issues and how you're going to resolve because the issue of criminal conduct coming to your attention. You said at the committee that you're willing to say, stop, we're not interested. And that just kind of, in my judgment, leaves some very significant issues basically unhandled if criminal activity is going not to be reported or this committee is not going to look at it if it comes to your attention.
Thank you, Councilman Parks. At our lively hearing the other day before the Public Safety Committee, it is true, we are not designed, intended to seek information about individuals or criminal activity. I cannot guarantee that testimony about criminal activity will not come before us. If it does come before us, the attorneys, 4 of whom are prosecutors who have defended cities, we will get together and determine case by case how to address, as lawyers, because we have professional responsibilities, not to facilitate or allow to go unaddressed those types of activities. If we get criminal knowledge We will, consistent with maintaining the confidentiality and the anonymity which the panel has to have in order for officers and others to feel free to testify, we will find a way within the professional code of responsibility to address that activity. What I was referring to was that being subject to the Inspector General's rules was not workable.
I agree, but the question I think was in the committee was when you mentioned the systemic issues, you said if somebody said criminal, and that's why I brought up the question, how do you address that if later when your panel is finished, that same person comes forward and says, you wouldn't take my testimony? But your answer today, I think, clarifies it because it certainly, if somebody comes forward, you're going to hopefully allow the investigation to take its course as opposed to cutting it off. The one final comment, if I have one more second, is that in dealing with the issues, and one of your primary issues is trying to determine why a after-action report wasn't made by the police department. Being that I made that decision, I'll tell you very quickly, is two reasons. One was that when the report was written for the Board of Inquiry, it listed over 300 pages of what to do and what went wrong. And after that was done, a protocol was set up for the Police Commission on a quarterly basis to get updated on all of the recommendations in the Board of Inquiry, including Christopher and many other reports that were done. And that protocol was in place and went forward. And then secondly, the most significant issue was the consent decree came forward, which was the overarching report that took on a life of its own. And so that was why I made the decision not to have an after-action report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Mr. Ludlow.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate it. Colleagues, we've had a lot of discussions, very good discussion, and a lot of points have been raised. My perspective on this has been, and I've mentioned it a couple of times, relative to where we are with law enforcement in L.A. and criminal justice in L.A. There's been a real continuum, I think, since 1992. Voters ushered in the Christopher Commission police reform with Charter Amendment F. Was a clarion call for change in the city of L.A. and the way in which LAPD functioned. Chief Williams was brought in and began to enact many of those changes. One of the issues that came up following Willie Williams' tenure, and again, some would argue that it may have been impossible for a chief at that time to have 2 terms, given the need for some pretty outlandish things to happen and some pretty significant relationships to be broken up to begin developing some independence in certain parts of the department. But one of the items that followed immediately after that, colleagues, was this call for getting tough on this perception of rogue cops. I don't know if any chief in LA or a chief in the country stood for the image of disciplinarianism more than Bernard Parks. And in fact, some would argue, and I know it's difficult for us to acknowledge some of that here with him here today, not for me, because I think on that issue, he got an A. He got an A from a whole lot of people in the city of LA that one thing he did was become a disciplinarian. Some would argue that that had a whole lot to do with the action that happened later. But to his credit, that was a piece of the public debate. The third chief has now been Chief Bratton. And I think, colleagues, what we are now seeing is the continuum of a series of steps and a series of chiefs that have all had a piece of the effort to bring about what voters called for in the Christopher Commission police reform over a decade ago. And I would argue that, and again, just seeing the discussions that have happened in the African American community, with Latino leaders, with Jewish and Korean community leaders, I don't know if we've ever seen a time in the history of LA where the police department has such a transparent relationship with the community and has ushered in such a good spirit of openness and congeniality. There's a real relationship. In fact, the epitome of that is the fact that they just did a raid in Nickerson Gardens, and Janice Hahn and I went down there in the aftermath of a very horrific situation, and out of all of that, I don't know that there was even one complaint filed. Maybe there was one. I think I heard there was one complaint from the community. I remember a day when there would be a truckload of complaints and a march down to City Hall demanding that the LAPD be held accountable for the way in which they dealt with the community. I don't know about you, colleagues, but this is a new day, and I think it's something that we should take very seriously. In fact, so seriously, you got to ask yourself, the same wisdom and the same leadership that has sort of brought in this moment, is the leadership and the wisdom that is saying we need to continue digging in on some of the issues that have not yet been fully identified and fully resolved. And I want to make just a couple of points here, and I've been very diligently paying attention and listening and giving members their time, and not, I'm hoping you will indulge me for another moment or two. In light of all that, colleagues, think about all the work that has gone on over just the last 2 years. And when you think about what we're at the moment of, LAPD has had a mandate on a couple of items: reducing the image of the homicide capital of the country. Terrorism is a new dynamic that this department has had to respond to. Detective deployment was a big issue relative to the outrageous number of unresolved homicides in South Los Angeles. Hiring of new officers, still LAPD, not at the top by a long shot, number of officers on the job. The horrific levels of gang violence and crime in LA has been at the forefront of the media during this same period of time. Reducing crime, just overall, the image of Los Angeles as being dangerous. Community-based policing, the special events from the NBA games to the Grammys, the burglar alarm issue. How long did we spend on the burglar alarm issue? Outrageous. Now, in light of all of that, there still is this issue. I'm sorry, Janice wants to open up burglar alarms one more time. In light of all of that, in light of all of that, I see this as today, seeing this panel up here, a demonstration of incredible focus, that through all of that, the jury is still out on how far did we get and how much information came out, and did we get to rooting out the problems that brought about Rampart. In light of all of that, to see that this panel is here today, or that the head of the panel, and Connie Rice, is here today, members, says to me, this is a demonstration of incredible focus. It very easily could have been a moment where this fell by the wayside and that the department went on to focus just on police reform, on the burglar alarms or some other dynamic. I think this is a welcome moment, and heaven forbid, I think all of us would be very, very frustrated and in some ways disappointed if we had another incident come up and we didn't go to the doctor, we didn't go to the surgeon here to say, let's finish rooting out what happened and figuring out, are there patterns, are there issues, and there structural dynamics that we can pull out of the unfortunate experience of Rampart. The last point, Councilmember Miskowski, I'm going to make is on this issue of the panelists. I just want to go on record saying I don't want to have the debate about did these panelists sue LAPD. I want to have a debate about were they right? Did their litigation, did their action result in justice? Because if it resulted in justice, we shouldn't have the discussion about whether they ought to be on the panel or not. If these are the surgeons and the doctors that understand our department and they were able to identify a moment of truth, I want to think about the families and the victims, and in some cases the officers who were whistleblowers that would not have been able to get justice on that moment had that individual lawyer not been involved. I respect Connie Rice like nobody else in the issue of civil rights and litigation. If she's assembling a team and she says this is the team she needs, then by God, Connie, you got my 100% support. Go do it, and let's get this thing over and done, and let's make the best police department in the nation and something we can all be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ludlow. Mr. Cardenas.
I want to say that I understand some of the comments that Greg Smith has made earlier about why another panel, why rehash old issues or what have you. Well, quite frankly, I think that of the people who've been involved on many sides of this, I think that there seems to be a lot of open wounds or things that haven't been closed properly or what have you. I hope that this is the last panel in this chapter of Los Angeles' history when it comes to law enforcement. But at the end of that, I hope that what results is some strong and good and acceptable and accepted recommendations for our department to say we have some improvements that need to be made. I grew up in the city of Los Angeles. I grew up in an era of a previous police commissioner or commissioners in the 60s and 70s as a young man. And I'm very proud to say that I'm the youngest of 11 children who did grow up in Pacoima, and not one of us ended up in the backseat of a police car, ever. But I'll tell you a quick little story, anecdotal story, that just explains why we need to do this. And on a much more sophisticated level, we need to put certain things to bed and actually set certain things right. My brother was going to lunch with a friend of his. My brother is now an engineer, grew up in Pacoima like myself. Again, never ended up in the backseat of a police car, never once was in trouble. And he's driving the car, and his Anglo friend sitting next to him, they pull up to a light, and a police car pulls up right beside them, and his Anglo friend gives a big howdy-doody smile and a big wave at the police officers. And my brother's just looking forward and kind of looking in the corner of his eye like, what's that all about? So they pulled away or what have you, and the police car was no longer there, and he says, what's all about? And his friend looks at my brother just totally astonished, like, what was what? And he goes, yeah, you saw the stuff. He says, yeah, I do know. And I goes, no. And it's a sad commentary about the fact of the matter is that people perceive the same thing 180 degrees different. If you grow up in a certain neighborhood, if you grew up in a certain era, you have a certain perspective. And the shame of that little anecdotal story is, why in the world would an honest, law-abiding citizen ever have to have that even in the back of his mind? Forget about being in the forefront of his mind, about why shouldn't I smile when I see a police officer? Why shouldn't I be happy to know that they're there to protect me and my family? Why not? That's what this panel represents for me, and I respect and understand that it represents something possibly different for Greg Smith and maybe some other people in this room or across this city or across this country. But the bottom line is, I hope that this panel does the job that it's set out to do, and I have confidence that when the people sign on the dotted line and say, I am willing to confine myself to signing these disclosures and I'm not going to sue the city, et cetera, that they're going to put that where it belongs and do the job that they're set out to do. Connie, I have a lot of respect for you. I know, and I had a conversation with you prior to this about how at first blush you said, no, I'm not going to do this. Not even interested. And I'm proud to say that I think they picked a good panel. Is it the perfect panel? No. Are we a perfect city? No. Are we a perfect police department? No. Let's not worry about the perfection. Let's look at what we have at hand. We have a task at hand. We need to, in a much more sophisticated way than the anecdotal story that I gave you, we need to put to rest those subliminal and non-subliminal ideas that people think that our police department isn't as good as we know it is, that our police department isn't the best in the country, because I know it is. You're going to help us bring that back. I expect that, and I want to see some acceptance of the recommendations that come from it so that we can actually say we have some improvements to make. We're going to do it. We're going to do it because we have to. Our police officers, our law enforcement are there to protect and to serve everyone equally, and not everybody feels that way today. This is going to help us bring us to that place.
Thank you, Mr. Cardenas. Councilmember Gruhl.
Thank you, Ms. Misakowski. And I want to stand, as many of my other colleagues have, to talk about the importance of this panel. And Ms. Rice and I had an opportunity to talk. We were at the Biltmore for some event, and we sat on the steps in the hallway. And she said to me, I want to let you know what I'm going to do. And you shared the same story you did today, which was you said no the first and second and third and however many times. But I think we all realize that if we had our wish, our dream, we wouldn't be having this panel. I think there is an understanding that none of us would like to have this panel. We would hope that this would have been never happened, that we could move on. But in fact, sometimes it takes a revisiting, it takes a fresh look. It means that we have to get to the root of the problems. And I think that that's what this panel and our commission and the police department, Inspector General and the city attorney all agree. And I would have thought we might have had disagreement among the members sitting here, but in fact there is agreement about the importance of this type of a panel and the lessons that we can learn. There is a reason that we read history books. There's a reason that we look back so that we never make the same mistakes again. And so I'm pleased that this panel issue is before us. It is my hope that this will be the last time we sit in the City Council chambers and talk not only about a Rampart, but any other issues relative to LAPD and potential problems. I think there is a feeling by the officers I've spoken to in my district, a commitment to want to have the kind of relationship that Mr. Cardenas mentioned, the ability to say hello and smile and wave and not have a fear of the police department. And in many of my communities, that kind of feeling is being developed and has blossomed under the Senior Lead program. So I wanted to stand in support of this. I've listened to all the discussions, and as I said to Ms. Hahn, I don't know if we need another voice to stand up, but I felt the urge to say that it was very important and that I support the efforts and the items before us today, and I think the motion, particularly that Ms. Sikowski made to have a technical amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Weiss for a second time. Mr. Smith is also on after you. Okay, you're going to defer to Mr. Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Weiss. You know, if there was ever a compelling argument for it, I think Mr. Ludlow's statements actually supported the idea that we don't need to do this. He said that in his community, they go into Nickerson Gardens, the people stood up and applauded and supported the police. Last week, I saw our chief of police with the African-American leadership of this city standing up saying, quit shooting at the police, let's support them. There has been a huge shift, a paradigm shift in the public support of LAPD. Opening this old wound, scraping the scabs off it, will do nothing more than rekindle opposition to LAPD. We don't need to do that. Let me ask you a question, Mr. Inspector General. There's a comment that was made here about the ability to offer immunity to people who want to come forward. Has anybody come to you and said they have information on Rampart they'd like to talk about, but they want immunity?
No one has come to me directly in that with that specific comment. However, I will say this: have I had encounters with officers that said, "Look, I have some information I'd like to share with you, but you can't guarantee anonymity," and as a result,
on Rampart?
Not necessarily as to Rampart, but generally speaking, I think that's why this panel guaranteeing that anonymity and providing the immunity is significant. The reality of it is with my job, given the work rules that I have, there are certain things that I cannot keep in confidence. And I think there's some information that is out there that personnel from the department will share with the panel that they quite frankly cannot share with me.
Chief, have you had anybody tell you that?
I think what the people have been hesitant to come forward in the past on some issues because of not immunity for the act itself, but for failure to report the act. And those are the issues that we're looking at here. In response to the first portion of your question about, or your statement about the success we've had as evidenced by what happened last week in Nickerson Gardens and the leaders of the black community dealing with the chief to try and stem the assaults on officers, we celebrate those, and those are big milestones, I think, for the department and for the city. However, the chief is 100% on board with this blue ribbon panel and pushing very hard to ensure that this occurs and that we bring a panel in of respected leaders who will take a look at the department and help us take that next step. We've come a long way, but we've still got a long way to go.
I appreciate that, but this is my time, so make your speech and your closing arguments, if you would, please. And by the way, it's hard, not hard. You've been around, Bill, already too long, I can tell.
Thanks.
Finally, you know, you both said, no one said anything to you, that they would come forward on Rampart issues if given immunity. During the whole process, the ability for us to give immunity existed under the original investigation. Is that not right? So we had that ability. Whatever officers were going to come forward had the opportunity. Did anyone take advantage of that? Were there any?
I'm not aware.
No.
What is
But
your
the answer is
question?
no.
What is your question?
The question was, when we did the Rampart investigation, we had the ability to offer immunity. We gave it to LAPD officers, and the question was, did any take advantage of it? And the answer is no. And so part of your argument for this was, you want the ability of officers to come forward if they have knowledge that something happened out there in the original Rampart case, and they didn't speak up, and now giving them immunity is going to bring them forward. Well, we gave them immunity last time, and nothing happened then. Nothing's going to change. Nobody's come forward to anybody. Now, you also said there's a need for this, that there's really a need for this. We need to go forward with this. to re-explore this. I got to ask members of this council, has anybody had anybody come up to you and say, we never finished the job on Rampart? I haven't. Have any of you? Mr. Weiss? Anybody? Has one single person in this council had a citizen, a police officer, or anybody come up and said, we didn't finish the job on Rampart? No. So why are we doing this?
Could I just clarify one quick point, if I may? I think you asked a question of whether or not any immunity was granted. I don't know, and I don't believe that any officer came forward during the Rampart investigation to request it. But I don't think that's the issue. But I don't think that that's the issue here. I think it's much broader than simply investigating a specific criminal incident. We're going beyond that. And currently, we have an extraordinary opportunity. I think you've indicated, and certainly for the men and women of LAPD, we are moving in the right direction. The mayor, the city council, the chief of police, the police commission, the department itself, even the community is hungry for us to get this behind us, but get it behind us in the right way. And I think to simply say that's an isolated incident and let's not ask the tough questions will only allow us to revisit it. And I would suggest to you, if you've ever read Luke Cannon's book, there's been a cycle over time, official negligence, of how LAPD has evolved. We have an extraordinary opportunity to break that cycle and really take the step of going
And you're
further.
doing it now, and you should be commended for that. You are doing it now. This chief is doing it now. You're making incredible inroads. This panel will only take us backwards, not forward. And the argument is it's going to bring up old issues, rekindle old hatreds, and reprint old stories. And for what? Nobody here has said there's a need for it. Nobody has heard that from an officer of the law in this police department, a former officer, or anybody connected with LAP, nor any citizen has ever come up to anybody in this council because they just said so and said we need to take it to that level you're telling us we need to take it to. That's all I keep saying is why do we need to do this then?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Let me recognize Mr. Weiss, and the last person on the speaker board will be Mr. Labange.
You're the last guy, that's fine.
Tom wants to be the last guy, so Mr. Weiss?
No, I just want to, I'll answer that too, and I called it special because it is very special. In the beginning, I appreciate everyone's discussion here. Greg, what's important to me is that they break it down. It may not be people coming up and knocking on the door, but in the future, the mistakes that may have been made, the mistakes that you were here at the time, because there was a rage as if it was a Southern California brush fire of heavy violence in the streets by people who didn't respect the law. And then unfortunately, those who were to uphold the law went out and tried to combat that rage, and they overstepped it. They overstepped it. And if we have to look at only ourselves in the mirror to say that every day that we stand and talk and speak and listen and hear to the people that we represent, that we should always be as clean as we can on every issue. And I believe that trying to put all these various things together that have all been about Rampart will help us in the future. Maybe it could be redundant, but I thought of the only analogy, which many of you may not like, but what is every NFL football coach doing right now? They're breaking down, what'd you say? What'd you say?
Getting a new job.
Oh, getting a new job. They're breaking down their film of each game that they had. Why? To see how they could improve next year to win. And if we could use that analogy, they're breaking down the film of every incident involved in this situation of our history. And Antonio, there were greater rages. The Sleepy Lagoon trials was a greater rage, I think, than necessarily Rampart in that sense of the injustice that took place. And there were other engagements in the 30s under Shaw that the Los Angeles Police Department didn't do what it should have done to uphold justice for all people. But getting back to the point, they're going to focus on this now and in a time frame that gets back so that we can learn from the future. I think the big thing that I want this commission to focus on that I always thought was so important is the fact that we put a gang unit on 3rd and Union and the management was on Temple and Rampart, or Temple and Benton Way, and the fact that people were not together in the same building, and that truly created an isolated opportunity for people to do what we ultimately ended up in. Members, I want to thank you, and I also want to thank Cindy Misikowski always for her chairmanship as she follows over public safety so well, and I ask for an aye vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. Mr. Ludlow pushed his button for a question.
Item number 7, I just needed a quick clarification. Mr. Barot, can you I know we haven't talked about this, but obviously at the heart of part of the Christopher Commission dynamic was the great office that you have. If you could just say a word or two about your understanding of what item 7 actually means.
I believe item 7 stemmed from a concern that there would be a drain of resources as it relates to the Inspector General's office and my work on the panel. As indicated by the City Attorney and the Police Department, my work on the panel will be primarily focusing on me, myself, not necessarily the staff. There'll be many late nights and weekends that I've already experienced with having discussions with Ms. Rice and Ms. Mason. That's where the workload will have its greatest impact. And I think what the council wants is to just have an ability to hear from me as it relates to compliance with the consent decree in the event that my work on the panel might have an impact on that. I submit that it would not, but I'm more than willing to talk to the public safety to let them know about the issues as it relates to the compliance with the consent decree, because quite frankly, it will give me an opportunity to let them know what we're doing and the needs that we have.
And as Chair of Public Safety, I know a couple times we've had the Chief's report come in and talk about that. That obviously is consistent with your theory on how we should be reporting out with both of them, the Department and the Inspector General.
All right, members, I believe we're ready for a vote.
I'm sorry, there's a Smith motion to take recommendation number 2 separately.
All right, we will separate the question and vote on number 2 separately, which is the granting of waiver for conflicts of interest. Shall we?
I'm sorry.
There was another amendment, only one other amendment, which was the technical amendment on item 1C2. And there's no objection to that, so that change will be referenced in the language on that item. Mr. Parks, yes.
Point on the 1C2. I heard Mrs. Mason comment that the city attorney did not have the ability to determine whether it was a issue that dealt with a privilege of another outside agency. And so are we saying that the city attorney is going to determine if we followed the protocol?
I believe so. Let's ask Ms. Mason to briefly address that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilman Parks. What I was trying to indicate to the panel, is that it is not possible in all cases for me or another city attorney by looking at a document to fully ensure whether or not a privilege or a confidential disclosure is taking place. And therefore, we would work with the other agency ahead of time as to what process needs to take place so that we can ensure and then participate in ensuring that confidential and privileged information hasn't been disclosed. In some cases, that may involve letting the agency see what's actually written and say, no problem. In other cases, it may involve some other interchange with the city attorney's office. So all we're trying, and I think what Ms. Rice was asking for, is that it not be a mandate that the only way to resolve the privilege or confidential issue was to give the other agency a copy of the report, that rather we will work with the other agency to help determine what the confidential information is and how the assurance should be given that it hasn't been improperly utilized.
Okay, thank you for the explanation.
Mr. Ludlow for point of order.
Question on the motion to the panelists, and if I can ask Ms. Rice, if we voted on this, if this section 2 were omitted from this, would you and could you continue as a panel?
I need the team that's been proposed. If the council decides not to approve that team, then this doesn't go forward. I don't know what the panel members would be.
Mr. Smith for point of order.
Point of order. When I made the motion to separate, we didn't discuss it separately. We talked about the main motion throughout the debate. And so I would like to at least have a moment to discuss this separation if we vote to separate them.
As I understand it, Mr. Smith, you really have one subset item in your motion. You'd like to make perhaps an amending motion on that item to vote on. Is that correct? Can I just ask you, well...
We could amend it to send it back to committee number 2 then, so we can continue the discussion on the panel itself, which is where I have my big objections.
All right. Actually, since there's... I'm going to rule from the chair to let Mr. Smith speak on that item, item 2, his motion, and then we'll vote.
All right, thank you very much. I just have one real question. There are people, to the city attorney, there are people on this panel, without naming names, there are people on this panel that have sued the city. Do you have any idea how many times some of these people have been involved in lawsuits against the city, numerically or
I probably
generality?
I can't quote you the number, but I reviewed that in determining our position on conflicts of interest.
And what was your determination?
I think there are pending lawsuits. You want this by panel member? There is a panel member that has several pieces of pending litigation, more than 5, and probably certainly has sued the city more than 5 times in the past.
And I presume we're talking about the same person without using names, but there is one person I know of on that panel that's probably sued the city dozens of times. Would that be a correct statement?
I'm not sure dozens is correct.
Lots.
Lots,
All right.
that's right.
Without specificity.
Well, but I will tell you that's true of Ms. Rice as well. So
I understand that. I understand that. The whole point of my motion is that there are people involved in this panel that I do not believe are appropriate to serve in this realm. I can't imagine in a city of 3.8 million people we can't find some panelists that don't make it a business of suing the city of Los Angeles. And it was my hopes of bringing this forward that we would take a better look at the panel, go forward and vote on the other issue, make the panel a reality, make the process a reality, but take a look at the names of the panel separately as a separate issue, go back to committee, and determine if there wouldn't be maybe a stronger panel that could come out of this great city of LA that don't make it a profession of suing every one of us here in this city. And that was my purpose.
Mr. Villaraigosa, and I don't know if Ms. Rice wants to respond then after.
Yes, members, I want to speak against bifurcating this issue and separating out Section 2. You know, we live in a nation of laws. We live in a place where we say that the rule of law has to be first and foremost. What happened at Rampart was a violation of the rule of law. Chief Bratton and others have said that in this country, you can't break the law to enforce it. What we are doing here is attempt to learn from the experience of Rampart. What we're doing here is an attempt to ensure that this never happens again, that we put together the protocols, the reforms necessary in this department to ensure that the rule of law is observed. I understand my colleagues' concern here. When somebody sues the city on civil rights issues, not suing the city because they're seeking gain or profit, suing the city because they believe that in this city we have to stand for the proposition and the idea that you can't break the law to enforce it, that our civil rights are rights that today, just a few moments ago, we celebrated. We celebrated the NAACP and Brown versus Board of Education. I would submit to you that the commission is constituted as an appropriate commission, that we shouldn't second guess it at this time, that it has the support of the chief, that it has the support of our police commission, and so that we should move forward to approve this motion as submitted.
All right, we do have Mr. Zine, but I'm going to indicate that as the rule from the chair, I believe we would indicate we would vote on item 2 separately. I will take your statement, Mr. Villaraigosa, as to why we should oppose that motion when we vote on it, but we normally, as a courtesy here, allow a bifurcation so people can vote separately on the different issues. Mr. Zine, a clarification.
I just need a point of clarification. You mentioned that there were current suits pending with some of the panel folks. None of them involve Rampart. That's correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that was my clarification. Thank you.
Mr. Weiss.
I just want to note that, just so Mr. Smith knows, that I can understand his concerns, I can understand your feelings. The committee voted to support this commission fully constituted. the Public Safety Committee. It's been considered by the Public Safety Committee. It's been considered by the Police Commission. And there is, and this is a do-or-die issue. I've heard it from Ms. Rice many times, and I believed her every single time. I think that if we want to support this commission, we vote yes. A vote against any member of this panel is a vote against the entirety of the commission, and I think the time for that vote is right now.
I believe you're right, since we have no one else on the speaker board. So we are going to vote first on Mr. Smith's motion to send item 2, the waiver of conflicts, to committee. A yes vote sends that item to committee. A no vote keeps it intact as a part of the report. Just as chair, I'm recommending no. Open the roll. Everyone voted? Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
3 ayes, 9 noes.
All right, that is not removed from the report. We now have before us the report as amended with the other item there was agreement on, a technical amendment. The report is now before us. Open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
11 ayes, 1 no.
That is approved. I will send that forthwith to the mayor. Thank you very, very much for everyone who's involved. I think it was a very, very good and important discussion.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your support.
Next item.
Next item is item number 52, and that was called special by Councilmember Zine.
Again, we are still having some items before us, including executive session, but Mr. Zine on item 52.
Thank you. Madam President, this is a day of maybe some optimism for the grocers. This involves the grocers' strike. 123 days, 70,000 grocers, 70,000 workers in the markets across the state have been locked out or on strike. 123 days. And the last time they had formal discussions was December 19th, 7 weeks ago. And what I'd like to do is show our support to bring a conclusion, to bring an end to this. And what this resolution calls for is for them to come back to the table. And I know from my experience in negotiations in the past, if people aren't communicating, nothing gets resolved. So I'm very pleased to hear that today the federal mediator has brought both parties, management, labor, back to the table. They are discussing this matter. And I just want to keep this matter in this council open and continue it for 1 week, Madam President, to let them know that we're concerned to find a conclusion, to find an end to this strike and lockout for the 70,000 people who are suffering the consequences. No one's going to win in the end, but we will find conclusion. And what this resolution calls for is them to continue talking. And if they need to talk on weekends, need to talk at night, whatever they need to do to resolve this matter. I know a few years ago we had a situation here in Los Angeles where some elected officials got together with some members of labor and management and settled a long-standing dispute in a matter of a half hour. And I know that my colleagues have stood in support of the workers. I know my colleagues have attended many of the activities. And what I'm asking for is that while the talks began today, after 123 days, they continue. And whatever assistance this body can offer to the parties involved, we would offer that assistance so we can find a conclusion. And I'm not saying one side's right and the other side's wrong. I'm saying they need to come to a conclusion. And the only way they're going to come to a conclusion is communicate. And it's a give and take in negotiations. And hopefully we'll find an end to this. But it's a positive sign that today, after 123 days, after 7 weeks of not communicating, they are communicating. So I think it's appropriate that we discuss this today on this resolution. And I would ask that we continue this for a week, and hopefully influence will help bring a conclusion to this. I know the governor's made comments on it, other elected officials have made comments on it, but we need to come to an end for the 70,000 people who are impacted by this and all the folks who are inconvenienced by this continuing strike and lockout. So I would ask that we not receive and file, but we keep that glimmer of hope alive, and we would continue this matter for 1 week, and hopefully we can receive and file, and we can find some success, and urge the management and labor to continue discussions through the weekend, round the clock, until we can come to conclusion, so we can finally put this matter to rest. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Ludlow.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to rise and thank Councilmember Zine for not only introducing the motion, but I think he's fundamentally correct that we should carry this over. But again, this motion is an effort on his part and the colleagues that have signed on to really continue to do whatever can be done to try to bring the strike to an end. There have been some horrific stories about people losing their homes. There have been some stories that haven't gotten as much attention about people taking much more traumatic steps, unfortunately, due to the trauma that's been associated with this strike. There have clearly been financial hardships experienced in communities all around LA, and I would submit that it has a disproportionately significant impact, negative impact on the poorer parts of LA, where many of these employees who have been able to earn a middle-class wage, health benefits, who are not earning that wage right now and have lost their benefits, is doubly devastating. So, Councilmember Zine, thank you. You've been out on a lot of these picket lines. You've been out there holding press conferences. Everybody around this horseshoe has been out there on a number of occasions, and I think your wisdom in moving this, holding it off for another week makes sense, and thank you for introducing it.
Ms. Han.
Thank you, Mr. President. And too, I want to just rise and thank our colleague Dennis Zine for bringing this up today. And you're right, we need to keep this out front on the table to make sure that we, as this governing body, really are saying it very loud and very clear that we want both sides to stay at the table, stay talking. It's been disheartening to me that they have not been back at the negotiating table, because you just can't solve it unless both parties are there talking and negotiating and trying to solve this issue. It has gone on way too long. As Martin Ludlow said, many of the grocery workers have now begun defaulting on their mortgage payments, their car payments. They cannot survive much longer. It is really disappointing to see that it has gone on so long and that there has not been any resolve. And I would also just say at this point, a call for peace out there in front of the grocery stores. It's disheartening to hear of some of the fights that have gone on, of the shoving and the pushing. There's no time for that right now. These grocery workers who are walking the lonely picket lines out there, many of them have felt forgotten and neglected by their friends and their neighbors. They're only standing up for what they believe is right. They're only standing up there to hang on to what they consider part of what they signed up when they took these jobs in the first place. So we call for peace out there in front of the grocery stores, but we also really call on both sides to try to find a solution to this so that we can finally get these people. They're my friends, they're my neighbors, get them back to the work. And I know many of us have resolved that we won't go back to these stores until they go back. So thank you, Dennis, for bringing this in front of us.
Thank you, Ms. Han. Other members wishing to be heard? If not, then we do have a motion to continue this matter for 1 week. Seeing no objection, this matter will be back before us 1 week from today, February 18th. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Do you wish to clear the desk before going into closed session?
Let's do housekeeping.
Council has motions for posting and referral.
Motion shall be posted and referred.
There's excuse on the desk. Councilmember Smith requests to be excused Friday, April 2nd, to leave at 11:30 for city business. That meets council policy.
Mr. Smith is excused.
And that clears the desk for closed session.
Okay, before adjourning into closed session, let me announce for the record that we do have, I believe, 5 closed session items remaining on the desk. We have received a request to continue item 63, if that hasn't been done already, to continue item 63 to this Friday, February 13th. Without objection, leaving the balance of the closed session items on items 61, 60, and 58. Councilmember Parks is recused. So we'll take the items, Mr. Parks, that you're not recused on up first in executive session. Then Mr. Parks will be excused again for the record on item 58, 60, and 61. And without further delay, in conformance with California law, the council will now adjourn into closed session. Sergeants, please clear the chambers. Welcome back into open session. Madam Clerk, item before us, please.
Item before council is item number 60, and that's settlement in the case of Alex Spica versus City of Los Angeles. That's in the amount of $137,500.
Please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
That is approved. Forthwith, please. And I think at this point we can welcome back Mr. Parks, who's been recused on some closed session matters. Next item, please.
Next item, Mr. President, is item number 62, and that's in the settlement in the case of American Motorist Insurance versus City of Los Angeles in the amount of $242,000.
Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
That is approved. Forthwith as well.
That clears the desk.
Thank you very much, colleagues. That is the end of our agenda today. Do we have any announcements? Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to announce that the first of 4 Budget Committee meetings out in the community, it's going to be scheduled for Thursday, February 19th, 6 p.m. at the Epic Center at 3980 South Menlo. And we're inviting all of the residents from the 8th, 9th, and 15th to come and participate and give us their views of the budget priorities for fiscal year 0405. We will have 3 additional meetings in the near future, one in the valley, one in the central part of the city, and one on the west side. But this is the first one, and we'd encourage the public to come out, and certainly all 3 council members will be there to participate.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Other announcements?
Yes.
Mr. Verdegosa.
Mr. President, members, the meeting of the Transportation Committee will begin at 2:30.
And colleagues, there's also a meeting of the Rules and Elections Committee this afternoon set for 2 o'clock. It's now 2:05. Let's plan on about 2:20 to start. Give you 15 minutes. Other announcements? If there's no further announcements, do we have adjourning motions today? Please rise for adjourning motions. Mr. Labange.
Members, I'd like to ask we adjourn in memory of Robert Selig, who was a film distributor and co-founder of Show West. He worked for many years for Pacific Theaters. You probably knew him working with Michael Foreman. He was greatly involved with many activities in the Hollywood community in the era of Peggy Stevenson when she was the councilwoman. But a member of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce, Robert Selig, lived to be a wonderful age at 93. And members, additionally, I'd like to ask we adjourn in the memory of Bernard McElvedy, who was 79. He was a director of several shows like Gunsmoke, had a wonderful family as well, lived in the Encino. Bernard McElvedy lived to be 79 years old, and he was a fun-loving man who was a great producer and director of television programs that we all enjoyed over the years. Bernard McElvedy, thank you.
Other tributes? Mr. Verdegosa.
Yes, Mr. President, members, I'd like to adjourn in memory of Bruce Vann. Bruce was a prominent Los Angeles entertainment attorney. He died of cancer on February 8th of 2004. He was a native of Omaha, Nebraska. He was 48 years young. He was one of the founding partners of the Century City law firm Kelly Litton & Van. His clients included numerous banks, production companies, sales agents, and other companies located here in the United States and abroad involved with production, distribution, and financing motion pictures and television programming. He graduated from Washington University in 1977, from Duke Law School in 1980. He started his career as a securities lawyer working at Skadden Arps and maintained a private practice as a senior executive in the entertainment industry. Shortly before his illness, Van was elected to serve as president of Temple Judea, one of the largest congregations in the San Fernando Valley. Previously, he had served as a member of the board of directors for the temple. He is survived by his wife, Susan, 2 sons, Michael and Corey, his mother, Gloria, and father, Donald, as well as his brother, Martin, and his sister, Sally.
Other tributes? Madam Clerk, please call the roll. Thank you all very much. This meeting is adjourned.